Well, hello, everybody. As you heard from Penny's intro, I got my buddy Ryan Sprague back. He's probably the guy that knows more about marijuana than, I don't know, probably anybody on the planet, I suspect, except maybe some researcher that no one's ever met that hides in the basement doing nothing but biochemistry. But I've invited Ryan back because there continues to be confusion about marijuana on many levels. And one of the things about marijuana that Ryan and I wanted to help solve is access to really high quality, organically grown, top notch medicines so that you're not getting unwanted negative side effects or paying a bunch of money for shit that doesn't do you any good. And as Ryan will share, can poison you and does. So when Ryan and I got together to put an outline together, I really wanted to focus largely on the healing benefits of marijuana because that isn't very well spoken about in the mainstream media. And a lot of people still really have a very shallow understanding of the therapeutic properties of and benefits of marijuana. So we're going to dive into a lot of what I feel to be important stuff. And Ryan's put a really good section in about farming and how not only the medicine that we're going to recommend for you from the Sacred Smoke Collective is grown and handled and cared for, but what's typically done so you can realize what you're getting for your money at most of these, pot shops is what I call them. Yeah. But anyhow, so Ryan, welcome back, bud. Great to have you again.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks so much for having me. Anytime I get to podcast with you is a good day in my book. So happy to be here and happy to share anything that will help the listeners walk away with a deeper understanding around cannabis, hemp, etc., and how to use discernment in the sea of information out there and the sea of products out there as well.
Yeah. So you wanted to start with the path of the highly optimized human. So feel free. I'm going to let you roll. If I have thoughts or questions, I'll jump in when I can, as usual, but hit us, baby.
Beautiful. So first, let's define a highly optimized human. So highly optimized is one of my brands I run. And when I came up with this idea, or idea rather, of the highly optimized human, I was speaking to a human that utilizes cannabis not as a coping strategy and not as something to tune out, but something to tune deeper in. Just another tool in a sea of tools that people like you and I and your listeners use. Things like meditation, breath work, grounding, sunlight, and having something like cannabis be another tool in that arsenal. A tool to help you reveal who you are to yourself. Because at the end of the day, like Carl Jung states, until you bring the unconscious into the conscious, it will rule your life and you'll call it fate. And so as we go through the human experience, there are a lot of things that even if we are meditating and doing breath work and whatever, I mean, think of it this way. There's never been more psyops and thirst traps in the world than there is today. And a lot of times we just don't know what we don't know. And so at the end of the day, a highly optimized human is someone who understands and understands what cannabis can bring forth in someone, which is a deeper degree of clarity around one's own interpretation of reality. And it can allow them to be able to actually reveal what is holding them back, reveal what is working against them, reveal maybe what they aren't as connected to that is happening in the mainstream. Like, for instance, with the pandemic, a lot of people that had done a lot of psychedelics were able to intuit that, hey, something here is not mathing. Something here is not computing. And I think that ability to tap deeper into yourself is something that cannabis has been utilized for over 10,000 years, as we'll get into. And so really a highly optimized human is more of a comeback than a go back. It's someone that understands and understands what cannabis has been utilized for thousands of years and is able to mix that with modern day practices to be able to create a highly optimized human being.
Yeah. So some of the things that came up for me as you were sharing there is one, anybody that studies the history of yoga should know marijuana was central to a massive percentage of yogis' practices. There's always been the die-hard hardcores that have a negative orientation. Even to this day, I've seen and read commentary by yogis criticizing yogis that use pot or whatever. In fact, I've got a fabulous book. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I don't remember the author's name. It's not hard to find on Amazon. It's got a psychedelic looking cover. It's called Zigzag Zen.
Never heard of it.
That's a perfect book for you, Ryan. You'd love that.
I'm writing that down right now.
Yeah. So it's all about, it's a Buddhist book, and it's all about the use of psychedelics and as part of a Buddhist spiritual practice. And it shows the arguments on either side. And it's really very well done. I was really impressed with the book. So, and then we have Soma, which, there's all sorts of debate ongoing. I think it was Gordon Wasson that was the first one to really investigate what Soma probably was. And, I think most people think it was something along the lines of an ayahuasca type brew, but probably not ayahuasca, because I don't think the vine ingredients are native to that region. But a lot of people figure it was probably a mushroom brew. And it could have been a cannabis mushroom mix. Who knows? But the point is, there's psychedelic use is not only at the root of yoga, but in my books on the history of psychedelics use, there's pretty much evidence of the use of psychedelics in all the world religions, especially in the period of their origin. Again, people will hotly refute that, but they're, as usual, people that haven't done any research and just have a bunch of biased opinions, which is unfortunately
a lot of the world.
Why they should smoke better pot.
Yeah.
So the other thing is there's a long running issue and debate between, groups of people that would call themselves religious or people that are more left brain, analytical, whatever you want to call that group, but they believe that you cannot have a legitimate spiritual experience using any drug, which, drugs kind of it's almost like a swear word. They use it in the way of defacing it and saying, oh, you're on drugs, but a drug by definition is any molecule that changes the function of a cell. So pretty much everything you eat, breathe, drink is a drug.
Yeah.
Look at processed white sugar. It's as addictive as morphine. And Candace Pert said it should be classified as a type 1 drug, class 1 drug, because of the addiction and negative damaging effects it has. But people have become so accustomed to that, they don't even think that that's a drug. But the point I'm bringing up here is that I don't know if you're familiar with, are you familiar with Huston Smith's famous study that he did? It was published in I believe the Journal of Philosophy in 1961. And it was called, Do Drugs Have Religious Import?
No, I think I've heard you talk about this before in an episode, but I've never heard the full explanation, not in a while anyway.
Okay, well, if you remind me, I have it saved in my computer. At the time I pulled the paper, which might have been 15 years ago now, it was the most cited paper in the history of the journal to that very time. And so, Huston Smith at that time was hanging out with Timothy Leary, Richard Alpert Ramdas, and I forgot the other guy's name. There was the three of them, Leary, Ramdas, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but the dynamic trio there. And so Huston Smith did, I believe, 12 psychedelic journeys with these guys and had very, very profound experiences. And one of the things that he wrote about in his writings, being Huston Smith I'm talking about, was that what was very profound to him is that in some of these deep journeys, and he was talking at this particular time about a psilocybin journey, he began experiencing and having visions of and feeling as though he's going through all the stages that are well known to be stages of consciousness and that are talked about in different world religions. And of course, Huston Smith was considered to be the world's foremost expert on world religion. He spent 5 years living with the people of each of the world's major religions and practicing that religion as his total focus. So he lived in the country and practiced it for 5 years, and he did that with each of the major world religions. As far as I know, he's the only man in the world who's ever done that. So not only is he a very scholarly man and a very smart man, wise man, but very experienced man. And he noticed, he said, wow, this is exactly what's talked about in world religion by mystics, especially, who describe what happens as consciousness evolves and things like what happens as you approach death. I'm paraphrasing because it's been a while. So he got it into his mind that he wanted to do a research study, because whenever he would talk about these psychedelic experiences to people that were like bishops and higher ups in churches and pastors and preachers, they would have a very negative attitude towards them. And their common comment was, you cannot have a legitimate religious experience on a drug. So he said, well, let me test that. So he did something very genius, very Huston Smith-like. He basically went to preachers and church heads and synagogues and temples and asked the leaders if they could get all the people in their flock to write up whatever they considered to be their own legitimate spiritual experiences. So whether that be union with God or the appearance of Jesus or Mother Mary, whatever was their profound religious experience that happened through their own spiritual practice without the use of drugs. Then he went to groups of psychedelic users and asked them to do the same thing. Please write down whatever you would consider to be a religious experience that you had in a plant medicine journey or psychedelic journey. Then when he got all of them back and read them, as he expected, he could not tell the difference. What they said was almost identical in the way they described it, the experiences they were having. So what he did is he took all the ones from the non-drug groups and all the ones from the drug groups, and he used a coding system, but he took names or any references to who they were off. And so you just had code words like case A1, B2, whatever. And then he compiled them and he took them out to all the religious leaders that he had gotten the cases from, and to psychedelic users and even people like Leary and Ram Dass, and said, please see if you can identify which of these reports comes from people on drugs versus having an experience that comes by way of some kind of spiritual or religious practice. Nobody could do it. Not even the religious experts could do it. None of them. They had like statistically very bad outcomes when they tried to do that. And he showed that nobody can tell the difference. And then to take this one step further, if you study Jung goes on at length in many places about the fact there is nothing real outside the perceptual faculty of the psyche. There is no fact that exists if it doesn't exist in the psyche of somebody. Then you look at quantum physics. If you're not looking at it or observing it, it's not there. Mm-hmm. So in order for something to be there, even in quantum physics, it has to be a psychic reality before it can even collapse the wave function. Now, there's many arguments about collapsing the wave function, but I'm making the point that there is no experience outside of what you're experiencing. Like you talked about inner standing. Our inner standing is a priori to our understanding. Because if you don't understand something inside, well, you're certainly, if you don't understand how to manage money in your own mind, you're not going to do it in your life. If you don't understand food and eating, you won't do it in your life. So I think that these are very important concepts, but I also don't want to be misrepresented and say I'm encouraging everybody to do drugs. I'm not at all. And you know me well enough to know and know how many people I've had to work with because they fucked themselves up doing stupid shit with psychedelics. And you know, we're going to get into that, but it has to be done sacredly and with reverence. And it requires somebody with the intelligence to know, you know, how much to use of what medicine and, you know, what combinations for what purposes, what's best for emotional healing, what's best for PTSD, what's best for loss of a loved one and grief, etc. Otherwise, you're just like a kid in a gun shop and you don't know what you're doing. You think it's all toys, and next thing you know, your friends are dead. So I think personally, my feelings is that having a real good connection to your heart or / soul and having clear intentions and then getting help from someone like you or myself or Hamilton Souther or somebody with the skill and experience to give you the guidance you need to know what to use and how much to use, and any how-tos, is very important. But, like I've done a lot of ceremonies, but I do it as part of my healing work for people. And I spent a lot of time training and researching and studying and practicing. And I've been doing it for over 20 years. But if I just use my own life as an example, after I finished all my research, which probably went on for the first probably 13 or 14 years, quite heavy. During that period, I was probably doing one ceremony a week because I considered it my job to figure out what's going on with all these things and how do I know how to use something if I haven't used it, And I was doing a lot of mapping. I have countless notebooks full of all the diagrams and maps and things I've drawn to help understand what's happening to people and where they're going and what I need to be aware of as a skilled guide. But like I probably hadn't, I did a New Year's ceremony with Angie, but I probably hadn't done it for months. In fact, I hadn't done it since the last time a client needed it. And I probably now only do maybe 4 ceremonies a year. So maybe once every 3 months. And almost all of those are because I'm doing it professionally. And my philosophy is, and there's other people that have different approaches. Some don't do the medicines with people that they're guiding. But I think it's important for me to be on the exact same wavelength as the people I'm guiding. So I always stick with exactly what they're taking. That way I have a real sense of what's happening to them, how strong it is, what dimensions it opens up. And so, but, I've got the ability to do extremely high doses, way, way, way higher than most people would ever want to. Yeah. So like when I'm doing a shamanic dose at, say 5 grams of mushrooms, for me, that's just, I can juggle a chainsaw and draw paint, So for me, that's nothing. Because I've gone, 3-4 times that high, probably 4 times that high.
You and Kyle Kingsbury, the absolute unit.
Me and Kyle, he's my soul brother, and other friends that are in that small group. But the key point I'm driving at here is I think, and we're going to get into this more, and we've gotten into it together in previous podcasts. It's really about being intelligent about it and being honest with yourself. And my philosophy is anything's helpful that's helpful until it's not helpful.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's a lot of benefits to marijuana, but you get too much of it or you use it at the wrong time for the wrong reason, and it's not helpful anymore. Anything that gets abused, like if you get into the situation where you think, oh, the only way I can meditate is with pot, or the only way I can do Tai Chi is with pot, the only way I can enjoy my video games is with pot. Now you're putting yourself into a dangerous situation because that's a dependency.
Yeah.
And so I really think it's important to think of it as a tool. Like, most people wouldn't take their phone to bed when they're going to have sex.
Hopefully not.
And if you did, then then your phone's totally got control of you. Yeah. And the Chinese will know all about it because they're probably recording everything. So I think I just wanted to lay the groundwork on a couple of things based on what you just shared and what I think is important as we go into the podcast more fully, because I really try to practice the Daoist philosophy, not too much, not too little. That is the way of the Tao. Yeah. Too much drugs is bad. Not enough is bad too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that get caught in flatland and they can go to psychology appointments for 5, 6, 8, 10 years and still be stuck in flatland. I've had a lot of them as clients and patients. And sometimes a well-placed mushroom journey can do 10 years of psychology work in, 8 hours.
It has for me.
Especially if you have a therapist like me doing integration work with you to keep you honest with yourself. So I just wanted to share those comments because I think these are very, very important things. And I think there's so many, even to this day, there's so many stereotypical images. And in fact, the legalization of marijuana has actually amplified a lot of stereotypical images on both sides of the fence. you've got that stuff will kill you. It'll give you cancer or whatever else. And then you've also got, you can use it for everything. I smoke it all day long. It's legal, and so that's kind of just the kind of tendency of human beings is to fuck everything up.
What do you reach for when you need a snack to keep you going between meals? Here at the Chek household, we always have a selection of Paleo Valley's meat sticks close at hand. They are made from 100% grass-fed beef and venison or pasture-raised pork and chicken, and they contain organic spices to create flavors like buffalo-style chicken, jalapeno beef, and maple bacon pork. Paleo Valley's meat sticks are naturally fermented, so they are shelf-stable without the use of icky chemicals or questionable ingredients. Did you know that virtually all other similar snack stick products use GMO corn-based citric acid encapsulated in hydrogenated oils to process their products? Who wants to be eating that? Paleo Valley's meat sticks taste amazing and are good for you too, packed with protein and also gut-friendly probiotics created by the fermentation process. Paleo Valley sources from USA family farmers focused on using regenerative farming practices. This type of farming helps produce more nutrient-dense, nourishing meat while supporting the local ecosystem by helping rebuild topsoil, improve biodiversity, and sequester carbon while avoiding the use of chemicals and pesticides. So if you're looking for a snack that is good for you, good for the environment, and good for your budget, go to paleovalley.com/Chek15 and get 15% off your order of Paleo Valley meat sticks. That's paleovalley.com/CHEK15 for a 15% savings. Snack and be happy.
Right? Like most people exist on either side of polarity in every aspect of their life. And again, how we do anything is how we do everything. And I think that, what we're really speaking about here is how far off kiltered human beings have really gotten, but yet most people are not aware of it. Those of us that have done a lot of inner work and have worked with psychedelics consciously and whatever, we've had glimpses and very big realizations about why people like Bill Gates are negatively polarized, right? Why things like a vaccine from the federal government probably aren't the best thing to be doing. But you could see during that time how many people maybe worked out, right? Went to the gym, did a lot of healthy habits, but totally missed that. And so again, like, this is why I'm a big fan of understanding that we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And like you said, even when we know it, we only know it subjectively. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people get a lot of pucker around is when I start speaking about hermetics or, the world being a dream or there being no objective reality. A lot of people have a lot of comeback or disdain for that idea because they don't want to think that all the programming they have is just bullshit that they're still choosing to believe. Right. And at the end of the day, a true leader and a true adult uses discernment. A true adult asks, is this right now a calling or a craving if it's coming to something like cannabis? Is this actually going to help me, or is this just me playing mental masturbation with myself? And also, one of the things too is that we've never been taught really anything that is actually feasible and beneficial for a human experience, for an actual fulfilling human experience. We've never been taught about our heart, except that it's a pump, which is completely ridiculous, right? Which is silly.
Steiner told us that wasn't true in the 1800s.
Exactly, right? And so why does science not change at the brink of a new discovery? Why does it change one dead scientist at a time? Because these scientists also have egos, right?
Well, let me just interject something there. Scientists changes at the speed it realizes there's profit to be gained.
Exactly.
Because today science is a corporate enterprise. It's not the pursuit of truth. It's how can we trick the public into thinking, this or that is good for you. And look at all the magic bullets out there, and biohacking is just a freaking load of that shit. So I
totally agree.
We have these very real realities, but you made me think of something that James Hollis says. Do you know who James Hollis is?
I don't, but it's weird because my middle name is Hollis. So that's a good synchronicity.
He's a famous union analyst. He's written many excellent, he's been on my podcast. You should listen to it.
I definitely will.
James Hollis. I did, I think 2 courses on mythology with him. He's an expert on mythology.
Oh, wow.
His books are fantastic. He's an old man now. He's probably close to 90, but he's still going at it and writing new books. He just had a new one come out just the other day.
Wow.
But James Hollis says the unexamined life is not worth living.
Yes.
And that's a bullseye. And, I think what we're really talking a lot about here is this dangerous word called belief. And I tell people, especially the more dogmatic they are about anything, I say, look, you really ought to change that belief and turn it into a hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things I believe, but I believe them as a hypothesis. Like I have a lot of beliefs based on experience about God. I call them a hypothesis because in my next heart breathing ceremony session tomorrow, or my next Tai Chi session, or my next plant medicine session, I might realize that my hypothesis / belief actually has a hole or 2 holes or a ton of holes in it. And I would only realize that if my horizon is expanded. And this goes back to, what I define spirituality as. I define spirituality as a progressively expanding sphere of wholeness. So as you grow spiritually, you realize more of what you're a part of. You realize more of what your actions trigger. You realize more of how you can heal. You realize more how you can be in service to others. You realize more about Gaia and Mother Nature. You realize more about the sun. You go from I consciousness to we consciousness to all consciousness. You go from I, my group, or I to my group, to world, then to cosmo consciousness. And then you can go to, non-dual awareness. And so, it takes a lot of people countless lifetimes to climb that ladder even halfway. But I think, because most people don't understand how consciousness itself grows and evolves, they make the mistake of engraving an idea on the lenses of their eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
And now they look around and they only see a Christian God or a Muslim God or a scientific materialist viewpoint, or they only see AI as helpful, not dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what happens when you have a belief, because as soon as you have a belief, you think you know something and you stop asking questions and being open to new ideas. And then you get poisoned by being part of a group of people that have to defend an ideology. Just look how violent vegans can get. And you see how an ideology, or Christians. That's why I say, if you want to meet the devil, just pick a fight with Jesus. You'll find out how much violence there is in the Christian ideology and how they'll do anything to defend it, even killing you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not picking on Christianity because that's true of all world religions. Every one of them is full of infighting. I've studied the history of it and wars within the religions and blah, blah, blah. But the point is when it comes to everything we're talking about here right now, 1, don't bullshit yourself. 2, not too much, not too little. 3, remain open-minded and explore. And when it comes to plant medicines or psychedelics or marijuana, start little.
You can always add more, but it's hard to subtract.
Having Cheech and Chong as your mentors for using pot's not a good idea. Yeah. Nor Terrence McKenna. He's like roll a quarter of a pound into a huge bonger, go in the closet, shut the lights off, and close the door, and then you'll have a real experience. So you can imagine all the 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds just finding themselves in the underworld,
having ordeals rather than experiences,
ordeals that end with a 911 call, probably.
Yeah. And then them blaming cannabis, and then cannabis getting the shit end of the stick for people's own decisions with it, right? And that's kind of
same with all the plant medicines.
Exactly. Like at the end of the day, and you know this better than I do or anyone, if you look into the historical utilization of plant medicine, they weren't just given willy-nilly like they are today. There wasn't pot shops. There wasn't people selling mushroom spores. And I'm not here to knock those things, but I am here to bring awareness to the fact that it's almost like if you've never gone to the gym and you go to the gym and put 400 pounds on a deadlift and you try to pull it, and then you blame the weights after. That's what most people are doing when they don't realize that's not where you start. What I tell everyone is, if you don't have an active meditation practice or breath work or some kind of stillness practice, if you aren't aware of what stillness is or anything, it's pretty much playing Russian roulette, because if you don't know what psychedelics are, they're going to show you what they really are. And if you're not prepared for that, if you have no context around what the ego is, or what an ego death is, or what's beyond the ego, you're going to have a really bad time. And it's going to be framed as bad because you're not going to understand how to create an empowering story that allows it to be positive. Because psychedelics are meant to be challenging at times. That's by design. Because
they amplify you. I mean, it's they're not going to show you what they are. They're going to show you what you are.
Yeah.
And what ingredients is in the Molotov cocktail of the I, the self.
And if you don't see yourself as Hitler and Gandhi, you're going to have a very challenging experience when you realize you are the all. You're the ocean within a drop, as Rumi says.
I think it's important to realize that traditionally there was a lot of preparation. Look at the Elysian Mystery School.
Mm-hmm.
Not only could you get killed for telling anybody what happened there, but there's an entire ritual, a preparation ritual. Most real ceremonies that use plant medicines historically had a fair bit of purification rituals, detoxification rituals. Shaman in the jungle, real ones might make you fast for a week and only eat. Sometimes they let you only eat the plant that you're going to do the trip on. But they're cleaning you out. A lot of them use vegetarian diets because they don't want the spirits of animals inside you, because the medicines can bring that up so strong that it can be quite challenging for people that don't realize what they're confronting. Mm. But, like I have a very carefully planned out 3-day process, and there's a lot of build-up work. There's, things like getting clear on your invocation, cleaning your diet out. I have people do a mandala. I teach them how to do a mandala and how to work with their soul to get the imagery that matches their intention. I use tarot readings. So, and I also am clairvoyant. So fortunately I can just read people's energy field and see what the hell's going on. But the point is there's a lot of preparation, and it's not recreational goofing around. When people tell me, oh man, I did 6 grams of mushrooms at the rock concert, I'm like, you are just fucking begging for trouble, man.
Yeah, that's going to age like milk.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I call young, dumb, and full of cum right there.
Yeah. And if you think about it, right, like if we've never been trained on, let's even talk about like mindset, right, which is a very like mainstream type way of talking about this deeper stuff we're talking about, like Carl Jung's unconscious analysis and whatnot. But we weren't even taught the basics of what it is to be a human being. I mean, think of it this way. If white bread is on the food pyramid, that's not where the craziness stops in our society. That's just the beginning of it.
The problem is the white bread is who wrote the food pyramid.
Exactly. And again, like, we don't even have to think of these things as bad. They just are. And if we honor what is, and we just go, okay, Bill Gates, what if we stop thinking you're bad and we just peg you for who you are? You're a negatively polarized individual. You're in service to self, and okay. But once we have that awareness and discernment, we can choose to keep walking the other direction. Like one of my favorite quotes, when you realize you're in hell, keep walking.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people have never learned how to get themselves out of their own personal hells. And they've also never learned how to actually find the benefits in realizing their own personal hell. And that's what these plants and medicines can do. But again, it's very similar to if a 3-year-old gets behind the wheel of your Audi, you don't expect that experience to go well. And yet, because people look like a chronologically aged adult, they think, oh, I'm ready for this. But what we know is chronological age does not match with actual emotional maturation, mindset work, things like that. And so the benefit to all of this is that cannabis, as opposed to things like mushrooms or LSD, is, I'd say, harder to get yourself in trouble with, unless you're ingesting it. If you're ingesting it, you can definitely eat a very strong edible and a little candy and, go into an ordeal. But I think this is by design in the way. I think cannabis can be a really good starter medicine to get people to start to become aware of the anxiety and paranoia that already live inside of them. Maybe the patterns of laziness, maybe the patterns of whatever it may be. And I think that if someone is able to understand and find the right medicine to work with, which is a big topic of this conversation, because not all cannabis is created equal, and that goes for hemp as well. But if they can find access to the right medicine and they don't do anything reckless, they can have an overall positive experience without necessarily needing a guide. They can take a hit, lay down, do some breath work, and they'll probably come out of it with some interesting realizations. Versus if they eat 6 grams of mushrooms, not knowing what's going on, not knowing what they're really getting into, not having a guide, well, the risk gets amplified quite a bit in that experience of them coming out, not knowing how to contextualize what the hell they just experienced. And that's where a psychic fracture or soul retrieval is necessary, if we think about it in those terms.
Yeah, I think too, in my experience of using marijuana, and I've got a long history of it, when I was a young man and a competitive athlete, most of my friends were just alcoholics.
Yeah.
It was just like it ran in families everywhere. I come from a farming and logging and mining and, that kind of, badassery. Everybody's got a gun and everybody hunts and everyone fishes and, everybody's driving around in a 4-wheel drive with huge tires and 5 guns in the back, and they'll shoot your ass for anything. It's kind of like the good old boy country style, but these are mountain people. I come from Vancouver Island, British Columbia, where it's hard weather and hard terrain, 162 inches of rain a year, and lots of snow, and so it's a different breed. But I found alcohol just made me turn into a kind of a shadow of myself, and I didn't feel good on it. I watched my friends doing stupid shit like going to bars and getting in fights with people and getting their teeth knocked out and just acting like idiots. So I can't remember who first turned me on to marijuana, but I just loved it. I thought, wow, this is good. I can think straight. I can create. I would exercise. I'd have crazy good workouts on it. I used to, when I was a budding triathlete, I would do, 20, 50, 60, 100-mile bike rides and smoke some good ganj and just grind for hours, and just like, and really feel like I had a deep sense of connection to everything going on in my body, my breath, my heartbeat. Like I was connected to everything. And so I found it very good. But what I've found it to be very helpful for is people that have had to protect themselves from pain due to emotional trauma or sexual trauma or challenging life situations, parental challenges that can be very unfortunate. And they've had to repress that to survive, but they don't realize it's working in the background. And when you have soul loss like that, the part of you that fragments to try to protect oneself turns into a watchdog, and its conscious growth and evolution stops right there. So if you were sexually traumatized or physically traumatized at age 6, there's a 6-year-old fragment that sees the world as a 6-year-old with the fear of the 6-year-old. And its function is to survey the environment constantly, looking for any associative links to what happened to it. So if you got beat up by your dad, then it's looking for any man that thinks, acts, walks, or talks like your dad, and it'll make you very nervous all of a sudden. You just met someone, you can have sweaty palms and feel nervous and start judging the person as bad, but you haven't even heard 3 words out of their mouth, because that's the soul fragment doing its watchdog work for you. And it's designed to protect you so that you don't re-traumatize yourself like that again. So what happens is people, in order to repress those emotions, they don't realize there's an active process. Most of us inherently want to talk about our pain because it's natural for us. The way a dog gets hurt and shakes it off. You see them shake it off. Animals typically shake it off, and they kind of reset themselves with a violent shake to move Kundalini energy through their bodies and balance the system. We've lost the shake it off consciousness, although there's a whole group of people called the Shakers out there. I've read an entire book on the whole shaking idea. There used to be some Christian religious people that were called Shakers, and so they go into trance by shaking their bodies rhythmically, almost like the dervishes do whirling dances. But the point being is, just think, Ryan, I'll give you an example of repression for the listeners and viewers so they understand what I'm talking about. If your best friend started cheating on his wife and you also really had a lot of love and appreciation and a deep friendship with his wife. If his wife came to you and said, Ryan, is my husband cheating on me? And you felt obligated not to say anything to protect him, you would have to actually repress that inside yourself. You'd have to try to keep, how do you keep a straight face, pretend you don't know what's going on, and not say something? So anyone that's listening, if you put yourself in a situation like that, or even imagine it, you'll see there's an active process inside of you. As an analogy, it's like if you're hanging out with a bunch of people at dinner and you got a huge fart, but you know that's very rude to do at the table and it's probably going to gross everybody out. You have to actively hold that back. So whenever we're repressing, it's like holding back a fart, and it's actually, there's a psychophysical process. And the longer so if you're holding something in your heart, you have to repress everything around your heart. Even your heart tightens up. But you get so conditioned that you're doing that, you become numb to that. And whatever psychological thoughts, feelings, and emotions are connected to that those faculties get repressed. And so your ability to feel safe to reveal the truth in this analogy becomes thwarted. It becomes repressed. And that knocks on. Then you start doing it with a lot of other things. And the next thing you know, you're walking around with so much shit trapped inside of you. The size of this fart is so massive, your butthole's in a knot, metaphorically. And so what happens is people's bodies start to armor, and their circulation to key areas like the heart and the rib cage diminishes. Then they start developing trigger points and joint pain and postural dysfunction and grinding their teeth at night and showing signs of elevated sympathetic tone and poor sleep quality, and on the list goes. So you see, I'm showing that repression's an active process. Now, I find you can use a quality marijuana, and especially if you have the skill like you or I do to know what strains do what type of work the best, you can give someone a couple of hits of marijuana, and all of a sudden they might just start crying, and they might find it easy to talk about the pain, and they can feel where their heart's aching. They can feel how their guts are all wind up. They can feel their neck tightening when they're breathing and didn't realize it before. And so I think it's a very safe medicine for opening the gates to the personal unconscious and the shadow material, so that it can be engaged in a way that you can control the flow of it a lot better. You know, like you said, if you put 5 grams of mushrooms in that person, when the dragon's out, the dragon's out. Mm-hmm. And the dragon doesn't shrink itself down because you're not ready.
If anything, it gets bigger.
Well, I was going to say, the bigger the dose, the bigger the dragon, because all plant medicines are amplifiers of consciousness. So whatever is in you, 10 grams of mushrooms will do twice as much to you metaphorically, probably not even really twice, probably 5 or 6 times, because it's not a linear dose effect. But, you know, on some of my high dose journeys, man, I had to meet every part of myself, for good, bad, or ugly. And I, you know, had to really sit and breathe. And fortunately, I know how to let my soul guide me through these things, but I've had to meet the fucking devil inside of myself. And, you know, as the old saying goes, the devil you know is always better than the devil you don't know, because you can't control what you can't see or know of. And Jung, you know, says don't avoid doing the shadow work. You got to embrace those parts of yourself, because until you embrace them, they remain in the unconscious, and they've got you. So, I mean, these are things that I think are very, very important for all the 100%. Reasons that we've just shared. But I'd love to hear, you know, part of our plan that I thought was important is to have you share some of the historical reference to how marijuana was used for healing, and various aspects of marijuana, whether it be salves or creams or, you know, smoked or eaten. You know, there's different ways to use marijuana. It's such a wildly diverse plant. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of chemicals in that plant. Mm-hmm. You know, we live in a world where stress is constant and distractions are endless. If you're like many of my clients, juggling family, career, training, and spiritual practice, You've probably felt the toll it takes on your clarity and vitality. You may even be someone that can't get through the day without drinking coffee, even when it's not making you feel better anymore. That's why I'm excited to share something that's become part of my daily ritual, Nandaka by Peak. Nandaka means the sword of wisdom. It isn't your typical energy booster or coffee substitute. Nandaka is a sacred blend of organically grown adaptogenic and nootropic botanicals designed not to mask your fatigue, but to nourish your nervous system, feed your brain, and support deep, sustainable energy from the inside out. That's what true vitality is all about. Unlike most mushroom products that are stuffed with mycelium grown on grain, Nandaka is made from 100% fruiting bodies. That's where the medicine lives. You get the full spectrum of benefits of lion mane for mental clarity and nerve regeneration, reishi and chaga for modulating stress and inflammation, and ceremonial cacao rich in anandamide, the bliss molecule, to uplift your mood and calm your system. Even the cacao butter serves a higher purpose, acting as a delivery mechanism to carry these nutrients deep into your brain. When I take Nandaka before podcasting, teaching, writing, or conducting a therapy session, I notice something profound. The energy is steady, the focus is clean, and my creativity flows without resistance. It supports the body, the mind, and the soul all at once. And here's the truth. If your brain and nervous system are overstimulated and undernourished, you'll always be inviting burnout. That's why I don't treat the symptoms. I go to the source. And Nandaka aligns with that philosophy. I'm truly impressed with Nandaka, and that's why I'm excited to share this powerful, effective support and nourishment to help you stay vital throughout each day, to bring you many of the core nutrients most everybody's brain, nervous system, and body needs today. Currently, there are over 18,000 five-star reviews on Peak's amazing products, and Nandaka is trusted by some of the top minds in wellness for a reason, including me. These products actually work. Tune in, reconnect, nourish your core. Try Nandaka and feel the shift. Nandaka is a powerful ally, and right now you can get 20% off for life, plus a free starter kit with your first order and a rechargeable frother and helpful glass beaker for mixing your Nandaka exclusively at peaklife.com/Paul Chek. Once again, that's PIQUELIFE.com/PAULCHEK. peaklife.com/Paul Chek for 20% off for life plus a free starter kit with your first order.
We haven't even discovered all of them yet. Every year there's new cannabinoids, terpenes, and other compounds being discovered. And, that's one of the main reasons why the current legalization movement is kind of silly, because humans are focusing on these isolates, especially with the recent rescheduling of cannabis to Schedule 3. I don't like to be a negative Nancy. And at the same time, if it quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And when it comes to the government doing something out of the kindness of their hearts is completely an antithesis to what the government is, if you understand negative polarization. And so when they rescheduled it, here's the thing that I get a little bit weary on. They reschedule it to Schedule 3, which is the classification for pharmaceuticals. And what do we know about the government? They can't patent a natural plant because it's a natural occurring substance, but they can break out certain components, pharmaceuticalize them, if you want to call it that, and then
synthesize.
Synthesize. Their kind of unconscious slogan is outlaw the natural, monopolize the synthetic. And so that's a lot of what we've seen. But at the end of the day, one of the reasons I really feel cannabis and hemp, because they're really the same plant, is the people's plant, or are the people's plants, is because anyone can learn how to cultivate this plant in their backyard with good soil, etc., and they can help with a range of conditions. And I'll get into why cannabis seems like such a panacea. But before I get there, I want to talk about some of the common things that people still to this day utilize cannabis and hemp for. But the thing I want to say is this is not new. Before 1937, when the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act was enacted here in the United States, cannabis was a part of over 70% of all medications on the market, even medications given to children, which a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, what about the children? And it's like, you mean the same children you're giving Adderall to? Like cannabis
and every other damn thing that poisons them.
It's ridiculous. Vaccines, all this stuff. It's like, guys, we need to understand a natural substance is never going to be as harmful as a synthetic substance. That's just how this works overall. And so some of the common things that cannabis is still utilized to this day for. Sleep disorders and insomnia is one of the biggest things. And, a big reason for that is a lot of people don't know how to turn off anymore, Paul, right? They know how to be on because they've been glorified and rewarded for being on, but they don't know who they are without the identity of the business owner or the athlete or whatever that may be on the other side of that being quote unquote on. And so that's one of the main things people utilize it for is insomnia. It's one of the only things that people like my girlfriend has struggled with insomnia for years. And she's gone through, before she knew, about all this, she went through all the pharmaceuticals when she was a teenager. She's gone to sleep studies. I mean, she's tried everything. And the thing that works is cannabis that she grew herself, right? It's like, again, like God, the language of God is simplicity. So why all of a sudden, after hundreds of thousands of years of humans existing, do we all of a sudden need vaccines, pharmaceuticals, all these things? I think a lot of people forget that we've existed for thousands upon thousands of years without any of this. But yet when you...
A good 2 million, depending on
exactly
which anthropological study you look at. But God, the history of the use of cannabis and mushrooms, you can read the Immortality Key by Brian Marescu, and there's other books like that. But there's people that have found bowls in sacred sites and digs with residues that were carbon dated and using other techniques that are more modern even than carbon dating, and found them to be 85,000 years old.
Exactly. And why wouldn't human beings utilize natural plants? Like, that's a regenerative system. And at the end of the day, one of the other things that's interesting to me is that all psychedelics, if you think about mushrooms, if you think about cannabis, if you think about ayahuasca, let's just identify those three right now. If you think about how those grow, they're some of the hardiest plants on the planet. Like, mushrooms grow out of poop. Good luck stopping poop existing in the world. Cannabis and ayahuasca can grow through cement. It's almost as if nature, because does nature make mistakes? I don't think so.
No.
So again, if nature made these things so hardy, why would that be? Well, maybe because they're very useful. And again, we can think about cannabis and hemp being utilized for food and textile purposes. That is so secondary to what cannabis has been utilized for. And the big missing link here is that people have been utilizing it as a psychedelic as well. Because again, a lot of illness is mental. I mean, I think all of it is, all of it manifests in the spiritual plane first, then the mental, then the emotional. And when it finally shows up in the physical, it makes sense why Western Med kind of paddles upstream, because they're trying to focus on the last rendition of this spiritual issue manifesting into the physical quote unquote realm. And so again, whether it goes to mental disorders, sleep and insomnia, anxiety, nervous system agitation, emotional imbalance, digestive issues, gut cramping, nausea, women's reproductive health. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. I forget what queen it was. It might have been Queen Mary III, but she was extensively using cannabis for menstrual cramps. So that's even in more recent history, a few hundred years ago. And so muscle spasms and convulsions, appetite loss or wasting. One of the coolest stories about that is Brownie Mary. Have you ever heard of Brownie Mary, Paul?
No.
So Brownie Mary, this is one of the coolest stories ever. In the AIDS pandemic, what she realized, she was a woman in her 70s, I think, when she got started doing this. She realized that one of the only things that would allow AIDS patients to feel some semblance of normal and be able to keep food down was cannabis. But at this time, this is before medical passed in California. And so she risked her freedom baking brownies, getting arrested many times for this, going to AIDS hospitals and giving out brownies for free. And so again, like, that's just one of many stories of, like, think about how bad the AIDS pandemic was when it was coming out. How many people had no options, and their only chance for reprieve was utilizing a plant. Because let's once again remind everyone, this is a fucking plant at the end of the day that was deemed to be illegal based on what imaginary line you're on. It's like actually ridiculous. And so again, that's another example. Headaches and migraines. One of the only things when I get tension headaches, especially being in Aries, I'm very mental. And so sometimes, when I get headaches, the only thing that will help me, even when I've tried Advil in the past, before I started to become aware of what that was, the only thing that will help me is full spectrum CBD. That's the only thing that will help me. And so again, like, how many people suffer from headaches that are trying to do all these things, brain scans and everything, that could be helped by just going to the right source and getting full spectrum CBD. We also have inflammation and joint pain. That's one of the other biggest things that can help with cannabis.
Stress. That's why most professional athletes use it.
100%. Stress, exhaustion, and burnout too. That's why so many CEOs use it. But I will say that a lot of them could benefit from learning how to actually learn from the plant about turning off instead of just using it as a scapegoat for that. But we have obviously spiritual practices. We've talked plenty about that. Social bonding. And one of the best things, Paul, is conflict resolution. So I've told this story before. I don't think on one of our podcasts. I'll say it again. But when I was a kid, before I knew anything about this, I just liked cannabis. Back then, when I would be getting in an argument with a girlfriend or whatever, my ego would tell me, don't you dare go smoke weed right now. Because it knew the second I did, even if in some parallel universe I was 100% right.
You weren't going to win.
Yeah, exactly. Because I realized there was no winning, because there is no right or wrong. So if you want to be right, you're undoubtedly wrong. It's a very hermetic way of looking at it. But, again, I realized that the second I connect with cannabis, I'm going to want to come back together. I'm going to want to connect with someone. I'm going to want to talk about, hey, what happened? How can we both make sure that maybe we have a deeper awareness next time? And my ego, that was completely contrary to it. And so again, just like you were saying back in the day when you were around a lot of drinkers and you found cannabis and you liked it, I think for a lot of us that are more heart-centric, we enjoy cannabis because when we connect with it, we realize, man, if the world had the right training and everyone could smoke a joint at the same time, what would happen? I don't know, but I imagine it would make the world a better place. That's my imagination anyway.
I think alcohol makes people less aware of everything, from their body to their feelings, to their environment, to their behavior, to their thinking. It's the classic numbing drug. But what I loved about marijuana when I was young is that it made me more aware of everything.
Yeah.
I could feel nature better. I could feel my body better. I could feel everything from the wind to the smells of things. And I found that as an athlete, it gave me a much more deep, real-time connection to my body. And it helped me overcome the pain that goes hand in hand with hard training. I mean, shit, until you've done a 25-mile time trial on a bicycle, you haven't felt pain.
I'll take lactic acid for 500, please.
Yeah, it's like freaking hell. Yeah. I mean, I remember the last time I did a 25-mile time trial for a USTS event. I can't remember what you had to get time trialed in order to qualify for a certain level of this event. It was a long time ago, but so I went to this time trial, and I've done multiple of them, but this one I really freaking gave it my all. And I did 25 miles in 1 hour flat. So Woo. I was averaging 25. And this is like in probably 1990. No, it was actually in the 80s. It was before I went in the military. So I don't know. I was probably 22 years old. So, that's 42 years ago. But so my point is, I was riding a Reynolds 531 frame. My bike probably weighed 25 pounds compared to what they're riding today. That's like a bulldozer.
Yeah.
But I just remember, like, of all the sports I've ever played, it's one thing to get hit real hard in football or have your nose smashed in a boxing ring. And, even if your nose is bleeding all over your face, but when you've got that level of pain for an hour straight, it's literally like self-inflicted torture.
Guantanamo Bay treatment.
Yeah. But, the point is that I found when I trained hard to get ready for events, the cannabis helped me through it. It really helped me breathe through it and to stay in a positive state of mind and to see the experience not as negative, but as the experience of growing myself. But you'd never get that from alcohol or almost any other drug that I know of.
Millions of people are carrying parasites, and most don't even know it. In fact, the chances are good that you have one or more parasites inside you right now, leeching off your nutrients and strength. But before you get all freaked out about it, here is some good news. Organifi's Parasite Cleanse Kit contains a unique and specialized blend of carefully chosen natural elements that help locate, kill, and remove unwanted guests and pests from the body. Like a magnet finding iron in the sand, these ingredients adhere to the toxins and parasites and pull them out of hiding, ultimately removing them from your body. This two-step combination of 100% natural ingredients includes the Parasite Cleanse capsules and the Bind and Restore tincture, creating an easy-to-use cleanse that is perfect to help get rid of your unwanted guests. Now is a great time to try Organifi's Parasite Cleanse Kit and save 20%. Go to Organifi.com/Chek20 and use the promo code Chek20. That's Organifi.com/CHEK20 and use the code Chek20 for a 20% discount.
No, you really don't. And one of the things that are analogies that I like a lot. Have you ever read Mastery of Self by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr.? I think it's Jr. I don't think I've read that one. It's an adorable little book, and they open up with a great analogy that I just really thought captured how life works, or at least as I've seen it work, which is, imagine you show up at a party. And when you get there, maybe you arrive a little late, and people are in varying stages of inebriation. So some people have just had a drink or two. You can pretty much hold a conversation with them, but you can tell they're trying to pull you into some drama. They're trying to do some stuff because they don't know if you're drunk. They don't know if you are. And the deeper level of inebriation they're in equals the less awareness they have of the fact that you're there sober. You're not with them. So they're trying to pull you into all this shit. And depending on the level of inebriation and depending on your level of sobriety, you just can kind of see it. And there's no need to try to tell them, hey, you're really drunk right now. And I'm not. Like, they're not going to hear it. Right. So it's just it's a wasted energy. And
so it's trying to get you drunk.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how life is. And so again, like when we look around at these chronologically aged adults who are saying vaccines are good for you or whatever, they're drunk. They just don't know they're drunk, and they don't know you're sober. Yeah. And it's not that you're sober, like, you're completely perfect, but it's that when you do inner work, the result is you get more sober to how life is. And the challenge with that is that it might sound all sunshine and rainbows, but like you said, when you have to meet your own devil, that can be very challenging to go through. But if you have the tools, resources, and experience to be able to handle that, well, to the victor go the spoils. And so again, like, that's one of the main issues I see in society is that when it comes to cannabis, a lot of people are parroting what these same institutions that are now trying to monopolize on cannabis and have been for the last 50 years behind the scenes, but have been putting out all this detrimental stuff about it. They're not aware. They're just parroting these people's info and essentially being the person in Nazi Germany who would rat out the other person next to them because they think they're doing something good for the world. And so at the end of the day, when you're looking at these things, discernment is key in who you even talk to about this kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, people will hold on to their conditions so deeply because they don't know who they are without it, because they've never realized they are everything and anything put together. And so when you think about all these things that what we're talking about, right? Why does cannabis work so well for all these different types of conditions and yada, yada? A big part of that is the endocannabinoid system. And so don't
forget to give us the less common documented issues.
Yeah, I'll give you some of those too. But, one of the things that I think is really important to understand about cannabis is that the reason it seems like a panacea is that it's not a medicine that works on 80 different separate conditions. It's a medicine that works on one regulatory system that happens to deal with 80 plus different conditions and different purposes. And so we're talking about the largest regulatory system in the body, the only one that has two-way communication between mind and body, which is the endocannabinoid system. And so some of the other less common things that people think about too is skin conditions, asthma, glaucoma symptoms. And asthma is very interesting because most people don't think, well, wait a minute. If you're smoking cannabis, how is that good for asthma? Right. But again, smoking's not the only way that cannabis is utilized. Like you mentioned earlier, you can use even something like a topical that is not going to be a psychedelic type effect, but it's going to stay localized. But THC, CBD, et cetera, are very good in inflammation, especially when you are using full plant extracts. So you're not taking just THC or just CBD because you don't get the entourage effect if you do that. And so sexual vitality and intimacy is a big one that I'm always very excited to talk about. I don't know why, but that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Like, for instance, if someone wants something very practical to take away from this section and you're looking to have a overall better sex experience, a more connected, more fulfilled, whatever, seek out strains high in a terpene called limonene. Limonene is a very arousing and aphrodisiac type terpene. And so just there, if people didn't know that and they walk away with that, they're like, wow, now if I go to a dispensary or I hop on Sacred Smoke, don't go to a dispensary, go on Sacred Smoke, and you start seeing this flower has traces of lemon or lime in it. You'll know, oh, that's limonene. That's a good one for sex. Okay, great. And so really what I think we're missing here is the user manual for this plant. That's what has never been provided to us at the end of the day.
One of the things that you didn't mention, though, that I think is really important, especially in the environment we're in today, is that marijuana can be very helpful for men that have premature ejaculation.
Yes, exactly.
And that, unfortunately, is a huge problem.
Yes.
Many women have complained to me about it. And, that's just too much sympathetic overload. The sympathetic system triggers ejaculation. The parasympathetic system maintains the erection. So the more sympathetically stimulated you are, the sooner you ejaculate and the sooner you lose your erection. And marijuana has a very beautiful balancing effect on that. I remember when I was young with my first wife, I can't remember what kind of marijuana I was getting, because some of this stuff just turned me into Superman, and she thought that was fantastic. And it's like, wow, you could have sex till you felt like your poor unit was wounded and not ejaculate. And I think because sex is such an important bonding aspect in a relationship, and God kind of screwed up a little bit when he made men so quick to orgasm or ejaculate. They're not the same, as you know, but then the poor woman, she's like, come on, man, I'm just getting warmed up. So, I think part of the reason we have that is because we don't have a lot of really healthy, vital men anymore. I think healthy, vital men can probably dance with healthy, vital women pretty good and go a good duration without, losing it. But, if you get the right strain of marijuana for your personal needs, you can really have amazing sexual endurance, and it's far better for you than any of these fucking dick pills people keep buying and poisoning themselves with.
Those are an abomination. And at the end of the day, like you said, one of my favorite things to do with cannabis, one of my favorite things to teach people how to do with cannabis is including tantra work into cannabis. Because for a lot of men, let's be honest, right? When it comes to men overall, a lot of us have learned that the entire point of sex is not only just orgasm, but ejaculation. And most men don't think those things can be separated. Like you alluded to, they aren't the same thing. And you don't have to ejaculate when you orgasm. But just that alone will make most men be like, what are you talking about? But at the end of the day, most men have been trained to think that, hey, if I get to orgasm and ejaculate, cool, that's the best I can do. And so at the end of the day, if you can allow someone, like we were talking about in the live with Tai Chi, a lot of men specifically can't really feel the subtleties of Tai Chi, but if you get them high first and then do it, so they can understand how to become aware, they understand what being in their body feels like. Well, now they can actually work towards that in a sober state because they know what they're actually going for. They might have no context for it. They might have never felt in their bodies since they can remember. And so very similar with sex, a lot of men, I think, just don't really understand how much better sex can be when you're actually connecting and not just looking to ejaculate and have an orgasm. That's really like junk food sex, in my opinion. And most men are living in that. And a lot of women, unfortunately, have to deal with that too, because they've been trained to think that's the whole point as well. And so I think both of us, both genders, have a huge opportunity to benefit. And it's fun. I mean, like, we can add that in too. A lot of people aren't used to having medicine and fun go together. And I think sometimes people think that they can't have both. But this is a have your cake, eat it too, and the cake is gluten-free scenario at the end of the day.
I can tell you something marijuana does for almost everybody that I know, and I know you'll agree with this. It makes listening to music a much more rich, vital, full-bodied experience. I mean, you actually become the music. And that's true of all psychedelics, but marijuana, for all the reasons of that we've been talking about, man, you put on some good music and wow, you can go on a journey, a musical journey. I mean, shit, I got some, I think you've seen my music library. I got, a lot of, I collect music like I collect the best coffee beans and the best pot and everything else. But, wow, you listen to somebody like Meetin and Diva Pramal and smoke some pot and you will actually have a spiritual experience. I mean, they will take you there.
I mean, one of the first things I did in my Connect with Cannabis program is this is the first ceremony actually I ever hosted. It just came to me as an idea. People kept asking me down at Mark England's house when I would go down there, like, hey, can you host a ceremony? And this was before I officially started being a cannabis coach. And so one of the things that I would do with myself is I would kind of ask myself, what 4 songs do I really feel resonate with me right now? What 4 songs do I have on repeat? And I would take those down. I would start to think into, in a sober state, okay, what meaning do I attribute to these songs? Why do I think they're resonating with me right now? And then I would connect with cannabis and I would listen to all 4 of them. And I would then write after about what new meaning, if any, I have around these songs. And that could be one of the best ways to interpret, because music and cannabis, in my opinion, act as carrier waves for emotion. You know,
Yeah.
you can be a guy that doesn't resonate with crying, and a song comes on the radio that reminds you of your mom, and all of a sudden you're tearing up. You didn't think about it. It just happened. And so for a lot of men specifically, women have this too, but women are naturally more in touch with their emotions than men overall. You know, I think that, you know,
thank God.
yeah, thank God, because someone here has got to remember how to do it. But, you know, when you go through that, it reminds you of how, once again, simplistic life can be. And again, simple is the language of God. Complexity, in my opinion, is the language of the ego. And I think cannabis and these things get us back to what simplicity can feel like. And simplicity doesn't mean easy. I mean, as you know,
hell no.
These experiences can be some of the hardest.
Look how easy it is to meditate or do Tai Chi. What the hard part is convincing yourself to do it when your ego keeps trying to talk you out of it and tell you how busy you are, you know, how cold it is outside or whatever the freaking story is.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. It's very interesting.
You didn't mention epilepsy. I think that's an important one. And I've known in my professional career a number of cases where people got help with epilepsy, even with things just like frying up some cannabis in butter and then rubbing the butter on to the body and letting it absorb that way, or eating it. But you know, that's an important one. Epilepsy can be a very, very dangerous situation and scary especially for parents that have kids with epileptic seizures.
Oh yeah. Have you ever heard of Charlotte's Web?
The story?
Not the story. It's a strain, actually. The Stanley brothers got really big around 2009, 10, 11 in that area, because they were starting to be the first people that were actively breeding CBD back into cannabis and hemp. And the first big strain they came out with was a strain they nicknamed Charlotte's Web. There was a little girl named Charlotte who was having something like an insane amount of seizures. I might get the number wrong, but it was like 100 seizures a day, like an insane amount. And she was very little. And it was pretty much like the doctors had kind of written her off, like, hey, there's not really much we can do. And so the Stanley brothers decided to start making CBD products and full spectrum CBD. And they started shipping it to the parents and working with this little girl. And the only reason she's alive today is because of that. She went from having something like 100 seizures a day to like 1 a week. And they were very much smaller. And so that's one of the biggest stories. That's when Sanjay Gupta started to get really big. And that was one of the first kind of mainstream demonstrations of cannabis being a medicine, was when he made that show Weed, or that documentary that aired on maybe 60 Minutes or whatever. And it wasn't perfect. But, you know, again, for having a guy like Sanjay Gupta, who's very like mainstream, be able to use his platform to get that out there, I thought that was really cool. And you know, that is a lot of what people don't see. You know, cancer is another big one. You know, we've talked about it before in your podcast, so we don't have to go into it deeper. But, you know, that's a huge one. I mean, think about how many people are passing away from cancer. And if cannabis even has a 1% chance of helping, we should explore that, let alone what people like Rick Simpson and his organization have seen, which is countless individuals treating and curing their own cancer with cannabis. So, I mean, it's really incredible what this plant does. And it's also very interesting to think about how this plant had always been a part of our diet, our lifestyle, et cetera. And it was taken out in 1937. And after that, a lot of disease started to spread. Now, again, that's a correlation, not necessarily equaling causation. It's multifaceted, but I do think it's a determining factor in the sea of dis-ease that we're seeing today. Because dis-ease is the forgetting of who and what we truly are. And in my opinion, one of the best ways to get back to who and what we truly are is connecting in nature. And so when we start to, you know, illegalize nature and we start to take it out and start to make conditions of good or bad on it, of course, how we do anything is how we do everything. As within, so without. We're going to start to see the negative consequences of that popping up in the human experience.
Yeah, on the cancer thing, I think it's important to point out, because I've worked with countless cancer patients, and they're by no means, you know, the only group of people that have serious problems. There's all sorts of disease processes out there that are just as problematic.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I want to make a point for the listeners and viewers is that it's not just the chemical nature of cannabis. If you have the drug mindset, you'd think, oh, what's the molecule doing the healing of the cancer? It's just as much the fact that everything we've been talking about, it brings people in touch with their true feelings, and it helps them review and reframe and recontextualize trauma, painful events, painful experiences, and to breathe through them and see beyond them and to find possibilities. And so I think it's important to realize that healing diseases with cannabis is just as much mental, emotional therapy, because it has just as many effects on the mind and the emotions as it does on the physical body. And I just say that because I don't want people to get a chemical mindset and think, oh, it's because part of the problem we have right now is all the research coming out on cannabis. It's like, everybody's full of $10 words, CBD, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, this does that does that. I'm like, holy fucking hell. Just tell me which brand to fucking get.
Totally agree.
But it's like, and I think we've talked a bit about this before, but like, I'm one of these people that has a probably a very different endocannabinoid system, because a lot of the marijuanas that other people tell me put them down and make them really sleepy have the opposite effect on me. And a lot of the sativas that they say they get buzzed up on make me feel very dull and lethargic. So the point being is, you can't just say, okay, this pod or this molecule is going to do this for everybody. And this is what metabolic typing shows you about food. Exactly that. And so I think we each have to sort of go through a process of foreplay where we engage a relationship and we learn the characteristics, the qualities, and the types of things that each plant can help us with as an individual.
Yeah.
Now, if I knew, for example, that you reacted similar to me, I might call you up and say, okay, Ryan, I need a cannabis that will help me with this. And because I know you and I have similar systems, I could probably get closer to the bullseye with one shot.
Definitely.
But if you don't know, you just have to, that's why I say start small, experiment. If you're going to go buy some new stuff, don't just buy one, buy a small amount of as many different kinds as you can, so that you start putting a menu together and taking notes. Okay, this really helps me with muscle cramping. This really helps me sleep better. This really helps me clear my mind. This really helps me with creativity. Then you start developing your own internal guidance system for, what works for you. And I think that's a really important thing to do, because we've gotten so conditioned to reading labels and thinking, oh, this is for headaches or this is for that. But it's not that simple. And it also, I think we need to take responsibility for ourselves by doing the work to find out what does and doesn't work for us. Yeah. Otherwise, you can make the mistake of someone saying, oh, this will help you with sex, and it doesn't. And now you think, oh, all pot's useless for sex. Well, wrong. It helped your friend with sex, but maybe not you.
Yeah. And this is why it's so important what you do with soul work, because I really feel like the more connected you are to your soul / intuition, higher self, whatever you really want to call these, things inside of us and, what we are. Yeah, the self. Exactly. However you can connect deeper to those things, you're going to be able to use discernment to a deeper degree to go out into the planet and walk around and operate and find things that work well for you. And honestly, isn't that like half the fun? Like, I enjoy that. Like, I enjoy getting a sampler pack from Sacred Smoke Collective of strains I've never tried. And I'm like, let's dive in and figure out. And of course, for everyone listening, like, don't try testing 5 strains the same day, right? It does help to do one per day, or even one per week, and that's how I like to do it. I like to pick a strain and actually use it for a week, because one day isn't always enough of a capture for me. So I'll stay on something for a week, and then I'll do it again about 3 months later just to see if it operates the same way. And then once I'm kind of locked in, especially if I'm growing the same strain over time in the same exact phenotype, I understand from there, like, okay, I know this strain is going to, promote this for me, or this strain's going to help with this. And that's one of the best things about Sacred Smoke Collective too, is when you go into a dispensary, like a normal dispensary, they're just going to have THC percentage because everyone's obsessed with the dick measuring contest that is THC
I
percentage
know,
these
yeah.
days. They might have terpenes on there, like what terpenes are in there, but it's very rare that they're going to tell you anything when it comes to what it is specifically good for. And that's not even really the dispensary's fault. It's a lot of the federal government and state governments do not even allow them to mention that it's good at any of this stuff. Like when I worked at a dispensary, I couldn't say, hey, Jack Harar is really good for headaches overall. That's what people have seen. I'd have to say, well, someone who came in, if someone said, Ryan, what do you do for migraines? I could say, well, this person comes in and they use this strain for that purpose and they seem to think it works well. But I couldn't say, I found this to be true for me. I couldn't make anything personal, which creates quite a bit of, distortion when it comes to someone walking into a store looking for medicine and not being able to have a full-on conversation around what medicine is going to be right for them. And that's why I tell everyone, the best thing you can do is utilize and learn these things, right? Like we're talking about, understand and understand and try this stuff out yourself if you do feel called to it, because it's not everyone's plan. It's definitely not everyone's plant all the time. A lot of people go through phases. I go through my phases where I might be off for a month, 3 months, 6 months, and then I'm back on. And then maybe I'm off again. And to the degree that you can feel your soul, access the true self inside of you, you'll just know the answer. But the answer is never objective. It's just subjective in nature.
Enzymes are one of the most important things we can use to supplement our diet. Very few people have normal levels of digestive enzymes. It's extremely common to be digestive enzyme deficient because so many people are eating cooked foods, processed foods, packaged foods, etc. The best digestive enzymes I've ever found are Masszymes by Bioptimizers. And one of the things I like about them is not only are they the most advanced technology for how they're produced, the science behind them, but I take them on an empty stomach every morning and every night as proteolytic enzymes to help clean my body. So I've got Wade here, who's the formulator of these enzymes, to tell us how do they work as digestive and proteolytic enzymes, because today I think we really need to be supplementing with high quality enzymes. So Wade, what's unique about Masszymes?
Well, one of the interesting things is undigested protein is one of the biggest contaminants that cause problem for people, whether it's in their blood or inflammatory conditions or even impairing recovery. And it's quite common amongst athletes who have high protein diets, interesting enough, who are looking to add recovery, but they're not breaking down their protein effectively. And that was my case way back in the day as a former bodybuilding champion. So we set about cultivating and developing an enzyme formulation that handled all of the amino acids in a pH range from 2 to 12, as well as providing an assortment of assistant enzymes. In other words, it doesn't just break down protein, it handles carbohydrates, it handles fats, it handles fibers, a variety of different things, and they work synergistically together to make sure that you can break down just about any food and digest it properly. Now, when you talk about the difference between enzymes, there's digestive enzymes and systemic enzymes. Systemic enzymes such as like nattokinase or serrapeptase. Well, they don't help break down digestion, but they can break down inflammation or inflammatory conditions, undigested proteins, or scarring tissue inside the body. Well, it turns out when you take Masszymes on an empty stomach, it works exactly the same way. It will go into the bloodstream and now works as a systemic enzyme, reducing inflammation, accelerating recovery times. Matt just tore his Achilles tendon and made a full recovery after surgery within a few weeks, which they expected for many months. He was taking as many as 100 a day. Now, I'm not suggesting people do that, but this was an extreme condition. And the bottom line is Masszymes is great for recovery, for cleaning up undigested proteins in the system, as well for digesting just about any meal. If this isn't the best digestive enzyme or systemic enzyme that you've ever taken, you get your money back. That's the Bioptimizer guarantee.
Spirit Gym with Paul Chek listeners can get 15% off their purchase of Masszymes by going to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and use the code PAUL15 at checkout. You can choose from 3 different sizes, and in addition, Bioptimizers always have special bonus gifts and additional savings when you get multiple bottles. So go to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and check out Masszymes.
I've got another thing I'd like to share, and I don't know. I haven't run across other people because I haven't really been asking, but I find fairly consistently, it doesn't seem to matter what strain of marijuana I use. I can't use it for more than a few days in a row before it starts giving me headaches. And it actually kind of has a downward turning, like my body's saying no. And so what I've always found worked for me is to have a lot of variety. So right now I probably have 10, 12, maybe 15 different, that might be a small number actually, but to me, I'm an alchemist, so I keep a toolkit of all these things for whenever I might need them. Better to have and not need than to need and not have. But so I found that, I would say my typical is probably about 3 days to a week, depending on what I found. The one factor that's the most involved is how much THC is in it.
Mm-hmm.
The higher the THC, the sooner I hit that threshold. Some of the ones that are like 12 to, I find I can't go about higher than about 20%. But the lower ones seem to have less of a problem for me. The point I'm making is it's good to have variety around, because depending on what your biochemical state is at any given time, how much stress you're under, and unknown factors such as bacterial populations and other things like that, our reaction or response to any given species can change. And so I think it's important that people know that your body can adapt, and it's better to have a little bit of variety to work with so that you can let your body have what it needs instead of just being fixed on one idea.
I totally agree. And if you think of it this way, most of the world right now is more upregulated than downregulated, right? I think we can all see that. And even for us that do this work all day, like I have to be very aware of like not drinking espresso that has too much caffeine in it. Like I'm very aware of this stuff because I don't want to be upregulated. And at the same time, if that's what, people like you and I, your listeners, are doing, think about where most people are at. They're going through the drive-through at McDonald's, getting a large Coke with a fry and a, Big Mac or whatever it is. And so if most people right now are glorifying and going after high THC cannabis, well, high THC is like a gas pedal to your endocannabinoid system, which controls your nervous system regulation. So at the end of the day, I think all of us, if I had to kind of throw like an objective thing out there, even though there is no objective truth, if I had to take a guess, I'd say actually most people would benefit way more from cannabis and hemp that use it if they went for 12 to 20% THC. But they've been trained to think that somehow if they buy cannabis that has less THC, they're somehow getting a worse deal. But at the end of the day, the question I ask them is, if it works, does it really matter what's in it? Because it really doesn't. This whole idea of us even tracking cannabis, when I was getting, into cannabis when I was a kid, there were no dispensaries. You just get stuff and you deal with whatever you got with. And sometimes it was really strong, sometimes it wasn't. And you know what I found was a lot of the stuff that didn't look as pretty, that didn't obviously have as much THC because you could feel it, just was way better. And yet at the same time, all these marketing engines and whatnot are trying to train you to think, oh, I can get the highest THC for the less amount of money. Like they're shopping for gasoline, like you talk about. And so I think that's one of the challenges, is that people have been trained to think somehow the deal is worse if there's less THC. But again, a plant can only hold so much in it. If it's high THC, it's going to be missing out on some of the other stuff that I think we actually need much more, like higher CBD.
Yeah. One of my friends, I can't remember, one of my friends brought me some really nice marijuana with no THC in it, just CBD. And I thought, well, listen, I never tried that before. And I thought this would be an interesting experience. And God, it had a beautiful calming effect on me without the buzz, but I really liked it. I really thought it was therapeutic.
It's awesome. It's some of my favorite varieties are hemp varieties. The Harlequin, Charlotte's Web is really good too. There's a couple of companies I've worked with that only do like THC free flower. And I love it too, because sometimes I have friends come over that are like, oh, cannabis doesn't work for me. And I'm like, hey, are you open to trying this? And then they find, oh, I can now have a relationship with this plant. And
Yeah.
now they're able to benefit, even if they're not using it to get high, of course, right? They're utilizing it maybe just for social interaction, to have a recognition ritual, maybe to meditate, maybe to just talk to their partner, maybe to, rub into salves on their sore muscles, ingest for inflammation relief. They can now have a relationship with the plant they would have never had if they were just going to a dispensary and, that's only high THC stuff. Variety is the spice of life. We need variety.
Yeah. You were going to talk about, why it affects so many conditions positively. I know we've covered a lot. Can you give us a sort of a summary of that? Because you've gone pretty deep into the endocannabinoid system and previous. So anyone that hasn't listened to my previous podcast with Ryan, there's just a truckload of information in there. But maybe you can give us an overview of some of the key points that you think are important, or anything that you haven't shared previously, especially.
Yeah, thank you. And so what I would say to kind of summarize this and really allow people to walk away with one statement that you can now share with someone that you think is open to this kind of stuff is that cannabis seems like a panacea because it works on the largest regulatory system in the body called the endocannabinoid system. And that system deals with a range of different autonomic functions, including things such as appetite, sleep, and nervous system regulation. And when we think about just a lot of the common issues that are happening in society, a lot of them fall into just those three things, let alone all the other autonomic functions the ECS entangles itself in. And so at the end of the day, one of the reasons that it's so important to understand and understand how cannabis works for you is that typically because of pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides, glyphosate, all of these things, air pollutants, stress in the environment, traffic, all of these kind of things that are working against us and making us dysregulated, if we can utilize something like cannabis that provides phytocannabinoids, CBD, THC, etc., that mimic the exact endocannabinoids that our ECS runs on, because a lot of people are deficient in these endocannabinoids. That's what happens when they interact with glyphosate and their gut-brain connection starts to get messed up and these types of things.
Can I interject for a second?
Please.
Where else can we get cannabinoids beside marijuana? We must be getting them other places if the body has a huge system, which it does, and it regulates. It's obviously a very integral part of our cellular physiology. And I can't believe that we would have been eating marijuana all the time through the billions of years of evolution of the human body. So what else interacts with this system and makes it work? Or where else do we get endocannabinoids other than just marijuana?
Great question. So with cannabis, the interesting thing is that the phytocannabinoids from the plant just fit into the same receptor sites that our own endogenous cannabinoids fit into. But other foods and things that can help with endocannabinoid production include things like olive oil. Every morning I shoot olive oil, just take a shot of it. Anything with a high omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So eggs, flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, obviously. A lot of butters like ghee and things of that nature. Coconut oil, all of these things are extremely satiating to the endocannabinoid system overall.
How about fish oil?
Oh, fish oil is fantastic for it. Yeah, krill oil, cod oil, any type of fish oil is going to be fantastic for that too. And so these are things that one can take. Like if someone wants to take something away from this episode that they can go do, and maybe they're not a cannabis user. Maybe they're like, man, Ryan and Paul, this sounds great, but how can I benefit as someone that maybe has a dysfunctional relationship with the plant, or maybe has never tried it and isn't sure if they want to yet? Well, hey, that's fine. You can walk away with this understanding that you have this large regulatory system that, unless you're satiating it, is probably out of balance in some way, dependent on your lifestyle. And so you can walk away with this and understand, okay, tomorrow I'm going to start sourcing some really high quality olive oil or some coconut oil, some fish oil, some seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, etc., that allow me to start working in the right direction when it comes to creating a optimized endocannabinoid system once again for every of these autonomic functions to then run through.
Do we endogenously produce any cannabinoids within our body?
We do.
I mean, we produce DMT, for example.
Yeah, we do. We produce anandamide, which is probably the one that gets the most attention because ananda from the Sanskrit word means bliss. And so it's the runner's high. That's really what the runner's high is. It's anandamide being produced a lot. Also, dark chocolate, I forgot to mention. Dark chocolate produces anandamide. So that will specifically help that specific endocannabinoid production in your ECS. The other one is, the acronym is 2AG. It's like this ridiculously long name, but that's one of the other endocannabinoids that one will be looking at benefiting and really satiating your system with more. So that's the two endocannabinoids that our own endocannabinoid system produce, and those fit into the same receptor sites that the phytocannabinoids in the cannabis plant fit into. So they're not technically the same, but it's almost like if you have a master key and you make a copy of it, yeah, they're not the same key, but they essentially do the same thing.
They open the same doors.
Exactly.
What do you know what glands or organs or tissues are producing these endocannabinoids?
So what I understand is that the CB1 and CB2 receptor sites are where they're received from. I'm not sure offhand exactly what glands and things of that nature are producing them. That being said, if I had to guess, I would say the endocrine system, considering that when you get the runner's high, it's producing anandamide. I would also speak to immune cells, especially with the CB2 receptor sites. They're mostly found in the peripheral nervous system and immune cells. And so I would look to those areas, whereas the CB1 receptor sites are primarily in the brain and central nervous system. And the CB1 receptor sites are where the high comes from. Like, that's why if you eat CBD, you don't get high, because it's attaching to CB2 receptor sites. And like you mentioned, and I'll throw this in there because it is important to understand, all of us have different endocannabinoid system makeups. Some people have a lot more CB1 receptors, aka they're much more sensitive to cannabis. Some people barely have any at all. So even like I've connected with many first timers that will smoke a whole joint and they're like, I don't know if I'm feeling anything. And it really messes with them.
Many people like that.
Yeah. And it might also speak to how their liver, they might have a fast metabolization rate of delta-9 THC, especially if they're ingesting cannabis and not feeling a lot. Whereas if you have a low tolerance to ingesting cannabis, you can theorize that you have a slow metabolization rate of delta-9 THC. And even for me, like, I have a very fast metabolism. You see me, right? I'm 6'5" and, skinny, but at the end of the day, I have a slow metabolization rate of ingested delta-9 THC, which is why edibles and I just don't really get along that well unless I'm doing very small doses, like 2.5 to 5 milligrams. So that's another important factor here too. And that's why, like you said, you got to experiment a little bit. Do it safely, of course, but if you feel
start on the weekend.
Start on the weekend. Exactly. And honestly, the worst case scenario for most people is they end up in the couch. And honestly, for most people, that's probably what they need. They need a little bit of off time.
Most people are tired.
Yeah. And they're not accepting it. And they're just like hitting the button and more caffeine, more nicotine, whatever it is, when they really need more of that off button.
Yeah. It's fun to learn all this stuff,
Yeah.
Like I just, my focus is not so much on the biochemistry of cannabis. I've read stuff, but it doesn't stick to me, because if I don't use it in my work, then it doesn't stick with me. So that's why I like guys like you.
Thanks, man.
Between you and Ben Greenfield and Alex Zeck and a few Dr. Kaufman, and Cliff Oliver, I can get about any chemical question answered that I want an answer to. So I just use them. You guys are my extended brain lobes.
I use you guys as the same thing. You mentioned a lot of my favorite people there. And, one thing I'll bring up too, because it's in our outline, something we wanted to talk about, and I think it's a good time to mention it, is Dr. Andy Kaufman and what he was just proposing when it comes to what they're now calling scromating. It's been referred to as cannabis hyperemesis syndrome for a lot longer, but it's this condition where people that utilize a lot of cannabis. Now, a lot is subjective, right? Between person to person. It can be much more in one person, much less in another. But someone who's an avid cannabis user who starts to develop a condition where they are uncontrollably vomiting, and the only thing that will make them feel better is sitting in a hot shower for like an hour. And so that's
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, that's one of the main things that people that aren't proponents of cannabis, or when I mention it's a very safe plant, they'll, well, what about scromating and cannabis hyperemesis? And so this is a classic correlation, not equaling causation. So basically what Dr. Andy Kaufman brought up recently was that things such as superwarfins create the exact same symptoms.
Right.
That,
I did see his presentation on that.
Yeah, that quote unquote scromating brings forth too. And so the question becomes, is cannabis something that's been around for thousands upon thousands of years and humans have been connecting with for thousands of years with no recorded data, even up to the 30s, of this ever happening? Is it a cannabis issue? I don't think it is.
I think it's exactly what he said. It's all the chemicals being used. And we both know that this is a wild, uncontrolled, unregulated industry where it's like fish farming.
100%.
People are eating farm fish, have no idea what the hell they're eating. They're using all sorts of exogenous or exotic steroids and bacteria killers and antibiotics and, just crazy shit. I read several books that looked into the factory farming of fish and other systems as well. But God, I was just shocked. I thought it was bad when I saw what they fed beef in these feedlots. When I saw what they do to the fish, it was like, holy shit, you want to fuck yourself up.
I mean, at least for the meat, yeah, it was GMO corn or whatever they feed them, but at least it was like a kind of real food item. I mean, the steroids and stuff are different, but yeah, with the fish farming, it's insane. And like you said, I speak a lot about the cannabis industry being dirty, but at least it's regulated in most states. It's regulated to a certain degree. So they won't be using like super warfarins in a dispensary in Massachusetts, but they'll be using chemical salts. And I think chemical salts are one of the next things to be kind of outed as causing some issues. Because again, think about it. The farther away you get from God, if you are God and you're existing and ingesting things that are far away and synthetic, that can't be good for you. It's just like, that's my personal belief system, right? At the end of the day, what is the argument for regenerative farming? Why does it matter? Because it's very close to God. It's working with nature. It's creating regenerative closed loop systems that help the land benefit as a result of you working there. And that's why
it's regenerative, not degenerative.
Yeah, exactly. And would we as humans rather be regenerative or degenerating? I think we'd all agree we want to be regenerating,
Yeah, unless you really don't like your life. And then there's a lot of ways to do it that are faster than shitty pot.
Yeah, exactly. That are probably more fun, too, as you go through a downward spiral, So, but that's why, that's why companies like Sacred Smoke Collective matter so much, because if we don't understand what is going into our bodies, especially when we're trying to use quote unquote medicine, it's going to be paddling upstream at best. And at worst, it's going to give us a lot of the things that we're trying to utilize cannabis and hemp to either get us out of or prevent us from getting in the first place.
Yeah, no, we've been going for about an hour and a half, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about the Sacred Smoke Collective because we've been teasing people with it. But I'll preface what you're going to share. I just want to say that, you're the guy that turned me on to them. And, you and Jared Picard are the two people that ruined me for being able to buy pot anywhere else. I'm like,
guilty as
once
charged.
Jared grows his biodynamically outdoor. I don't think he's growing much anymore, but when he had his big property in Northern California, he was producing stuff that blew my fucking mind. It was so crystal clean. It was a league all by itself. And then when you showed up in my life, I went, wow, there's another person that's doing something like this. And then there's my friend Trevor in Washington State. So you three have been the golden triangle for me. But once you turned me onto the Sacred Smoke Collective, I'm like, I can't even fucking believe people can buy this shit and have it shipped to their door in the mail. I mean, this
legally.
is like, I mean, you think of all the work you used to have to do to get stuff to me. Thank you, by the way, again. Like, I'm fortunate. I know a lot of people. I've been around for a long time. So, I can find almost anything a lot easier than most people can. I'm usually like 1 or 2 phone calls away from almost anything on this planet. So people to find stuff like you grow, or, Jared doesn't sell his out to the public. This is because I'm a friend of his, but, to have, when I got the samples from the Sacred Smoke Collective, I'm like, Jesus Murphy, this is like Ryan's pot or Jared's pot. You don't get better stuff than this. And I was just like blown away. And I've tried now probably at least 8 or more, maybe 8 or 9 different strains from them. And they're all super clean and just beautiful. And, because I spend a lot of my spare time painting, because for me, it's a spiritual practice and I just love painting. I asked our friends at the Sacred Collective, what do you suggest for art? And I was told, try the white. And so I got sent some samples of white and I was blown away. It's just so awesome. It's like a perfect balance of the opening yet being real stable in my body. And I found, wow, I can actually I have better brush control smoking white than I do without anything in me or on any other medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this stuff is freaking unbelievably good.
Yeah.
And then they sent me one that was, no, actually, that was Trevor sent me an ancient strain.
Mm.
I forgot the name of it. Black something, black gold, I think he called it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
he told me it was an old ancient strain that hardly anybody has or knows about, but he's kept the seeds and cultivated. It was very similar to the white.
Mm.
But the key point is like, I'm getting this stuff in the mail going, this is fucking unbelievable that people can actually get a hold of stuff like this, considering everything you and I've been talking about, the risks of buying stuff from your typical marijuana vendors and all the crap floating around on the street. So I just wanted to preface my sharing with saying, I have tested this stuff and I think it's a fucking miracle.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
people can access this stuff.
It really is. And for a lot
and the prices are unbelievably good.
They're amazing. I mean, you'll spend way less than you will at most dispensaries, and the stuff is actual medicine. It's grown regeneratively. And one of the things that, you know, when I met the founders of Sacred Smoke Collective, I was blown away. We had so many similarities and, synchronicities and whatnot. And we just got along great. And when I first tried their stuff, I was blown away because, as you know, I only smoke and connect with my own stuff because I've been in the world of cannabis long enough to just know, like, I don't really care about anything in the cannabis industry. Most people are obsessed with THC. I could care less. Most people are obsessed with what rapper is using and I could care less. Like, that's not why I go to cannabis. And hemp as well. And so when I found Sacred Smoke Collective, I was blown away because they're a licensed THCA supplier. So they're licensed, they're growing THCA hemp flower, which is identical in every way to cannabis. But because of the federal law that happened with the Farm Bill in 2018, we're legally allowed to cultivate THCA hemp flower if you're licensed, which they are. And you're federally able to ship it. There's no gray area here. It's not like, it might sound sketchy to people, but it's not at all. It's completely, you can look up the law. It's completely legal. And so what this is allowed for is for people like Sacred Smoke Collective who come out of places like the Emerald Triangle, which, if we can talk about that for a second, has the best microclimate.
Nobody's going to know what the Emerald Triangle is unless they live there. I got you,
yeah.
Or they're a pot fanatic.
Yeah, or they watch Murder Mountain on Netflix, which is not the best viewpoint of the Emerald Triangle, but, entertainment, right? But it's 3 counties in Northern California. It's Trinity County, it's Humboldt County, and it's Mendocino County. So these 3 counties make up what's called the Emerald Triangle. And there was a time up until, I would say, around, I'm just going to guess, 2008, 2009, where about 70% of the world's cannabis came from those 3 counties. So when you think about it, I mean, a lot of people have been growing cannabis there for generations upon generations. And why that's important is because if you go 4 or 5 generations back and you start thinking about how those people connected with the land and the relationship they had with cannabis or hemp, it's very different than, hey, Waka Flocka Flame or one of these rappers is using this strain, so I'm going to grow it. It's very different. They had an intimate connection with the land, very similar to the Native Americans and very similar to a lot of these indigenous cultures. And so they weren't going to poison their land with chemical salts. Number one, it was out of integrity with their values. But number two, they didn't fucking need to. They knew how to work with the earth. They knew how to capture rainwater. They knew how to make their own soil. They knew how to make their own compost. They knew how to put certain plants around their cannabis plants that would attract certain bugs that would naturally prevent spider mites and thrips and all of these negative things that can happen. They knew how to work with nature rather than against it. And they clearly understood a concept, whether or not they could logically and, articulate this, which is as within, so without. And when you try flower from Sacred Smoke, that's what becomes apparent, that these farmers are not just farming cannabis or hemp to make money. They're farming who they are. And that's what you experience. And that's actually, I think, how cannabis is meant to be experienced. If you read The Adventures of Don Juan, when he went down and started speaking with, all these different individuals from indigenous and shamanic societies, they were really big on, hey, you got to grow it yourself. Now, a lot of people in today's world can't grow it themselves. And so Sacred Smoke is the gap that's going to fill that bridge in. Right? It's the bridge that's going to fill that gap in. Because when you can access really high quality medicine, the medicine's able to work like medicine. It's amazing how that works.
I've actually noticed something else. I wonder if you've noticed this. I noticed that when you handle it and when you grind it, it's got a different structure.
Yeah.
It's lighter. I don't know how to, but like some of them, marijuanas, when I go to grind them in my grinder, my little, 2.5 hand grinder, they're quite hard. Like, you get a little piece of stalk on there and you got, you're doing a 1 RM twist lift to try to get the grinder to go. But this stuff seems very, angelic.
Yeah.
Is the only way I could describe it. You know how you have, like I've worked with a lot of elite athletes, and when you get Cirque du Soleil performers and athletes that have to do a lot of jumping and acrobatics, the genetic selection of those people, they almost always have very light bones.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you pick up the leg, like doing manual therapy, say I'm working on someone's leg and I got to pick their leg up and move it. It's very light and very strong, like a gymnast body, versus a power lifter or a shot putter or some of the heaviest legs I've ever worked with were track cyclists. My God, some of these guys' legs are just giant and heavy.
Tree trunks.
And yeah, and I noticed like there's something different about it. I'm sure it has to do with the way it's grown and the nutrition in the soil, but it's very much more subtle. It's more like the only word I can come up with is angelic.
Yeah. It's more well-rounded as well, without necessarily being rounded, because, I think there's a couple things, right? On the traditional market, right? And this isn't necessarily even the legal market, like on the black market, which is obviously what we're speaking against here. There's a lot of PGRs used, plant growth regulators, that can make your nugs really hard. Now, again, I know you're getting all your stuff from people that we both know and they would never use those things. So I think a big part of it too is the genetics behind it, because a lot of these modern day strains, they're bred for yield. They're bred for higher yield. And that happened, I can understand why that happened. I mean, back in the days where it was illegal to grow, people would have to with the smallest operation, grow the most amount of cannabis. So I understand where that came from. But these days, a lot of dispensaries obviously want the highest yield as well, because they want to be able to make more money to stay in business. So I won't even call it a bad thing, but it just is a thing. But the challenge is that we're losing a lot of the special genetics that used to exist, like what Trevor sent you, right? Like, whoa, that's wildly different. And what Sacred Smoke has is wildly different. And then when you think about how they cultivate it as well, they're cultivating it in the ground most of the time anyway, or like a raised bed or something like that. They're operating with the sun. They have an incredible microclimate in the Emerald Triangle, which is why the cannabis that comes out of there is so beneficial and so amazing. And, again, when you put those things together, you get a much more well-rounded plant. And you also have the ability to grow certain varieties there that wouldn't be able to be grown in, somewhere like Boston where I live and things like that, because the growing season doesn't allow for it. So they can grow a lot of like equatorial type strains and even more like just indigenous strains, things that are more heirloom, more landrace focused. There's a great company out there that I always shout out because they deserve all the business, but they're called Ace Seeds. So for any growers out there that are like, hey, I want to grow some stuff that is, heirloom or landrace, look at Ace Seeds. They have like some really amazing stuff from the Middle East, like Taskentai and Uzbekistan hash plants. And, they have a lot of really unique sativas, the original Maui Wowie, the original Thai stick. And those things have mostly been lost. We don't see those things anymore because people don't really care. People have been trained to think that THC is all that matters, and that THC is THC, and just whatever gives me the best bang for my buck is where I'm going to do it. And what I'm really excited about with Sacred Smoke is people don't just have to take our word for it. They can actually try this themselves now, which has been the biggest challenge for me over the past 6 years of being out there doing this, is that unless I'm flying out to see you or whatever, and I'm bringing a little bit with me to gift out, I would love to be able to gift my stuff to everyone, but I just, I can't. And so at the end of the day, what's great is that all these people that have heard me and people like you talk about this forever, about how not all cannabis is created equal, are now going to be able to go try THCA hemp flower, which is identical to cannabis, and you'll be able to actually feel it and experience it for yourselves, which is, worth its weight in gold.
Where do people go? I don't think I've ever been to a website, because I just go direct.
Yeah.
Because you've put me in touch with them.
Yeah.
So how do people find out what's available, what the prices are, make an order, all those important factors?
Great question. So you can go to sacredsmokecollective.com and you'll want to use code Paul Chek. And of course, you guys know how his last name is spelled. It's not CK, it's just K. If you don't know that by this point, CHEK. If you don't know that by now, then, that's a challenge. But You can
Well,
go
if
to,
you don't know that by now, welcome to my podcast.
yeah. But go to sacredsmokecollective.com. And then also, we chatted with Sacred Smoke before this, and they're going to do something really awesome that's never been done before. So for anyone that listens to this episode, goes on there, uses Paul's code, and grabs anything, you're going to have a mystery gift included. What that gift is, it's a mystery. I'm not going to blow it for you guys, but it's going to be a mystery gift. So my best recommendation is go on there and allow your intuition to guide you to what sounds exciting. What strain really calls to you. And the other thing too that you'll see on there is that they have a couple different ways for you to check out. One way is with Bitcoin. Now, for anyone that doesn't do crypto, don't get sweaty palms about that. It's very simple to do, but they also have other options as well. And if you have any difficulties with it, et cetera, just reach out to their support. They're amazing. It's one of the reasons Paul and I are both doing this episode to talk about them. We would never talk about anyone that wasn't coming correct when it comes to all this stuff. They're very personable people. If you have a question when it comes to, I can't decide what strain, you could reach out to me always and ask me a question about it. I'm happy to help you out where I can. You can reach right out to their support team and you can figure out from them, hey, what strain do they like for this? Like Paul, you were saying like, hey, what strain would you recommend for painting? They're really good at understanding what in their variety pack is going to be able to do that. So hop on there and try it out, guys. It's amazing. And like we said, it's very affordable pricing too. Even without the discount that you're going to get a 10% discount using Paul's code. So,
now they only ship in the U.S. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So because my podcast is listened to in 172 countries, so I'm sorry if you just got let down. So there's a good reason to come visit the United States or take one of my workshops and order some and have a friend get it for you or something like that. But fortunately, it's a gift to the U.S. population to have that, and maybe I don't know. I'm sure they probably are working on ways to go to other countries, but there's so many crazy laws. You got all these same bullshit we have in the United States is an issue everywhere, and
it's ridiculous.
It's not an easy thing to ship marijuana internationally, is what I'm saying.
Definitely not. And you know what is funny is it's a bunch of people that have never smoked cannabis making rules about cannabis. And it's obvious,
exactly.
But the only evidence you need is, what about the kids? It's like, you mean the opiate mill on the corner called CVS isn't an issue for your kids, but a natural plant is? Like, silly. It doesn't make any sense.
And another thing I want to remind people of, because I know this for a fact, because I work with a lot of elite athletes that have actually gotten busted for this. If you get on an airplane, even if you're flying from one state to another, you're in federal airspace.
Yeah.
So federal law applies. So if you come to the United States or you're in the United States and you buy a bunch from the Sacred Smoke Collective and you carry it on an airplane, they will treat you like a criminal.
Yep, 100%.
One of my, I'll save the name, but one of my very famous athletes was, going from one event to the next, had a bunch of stuff with him, including a vaporizer. And they were just, buckling up to get ready to close the doors. And all of a sudden 3 cops walked in and spoke to the flight attendant. And then they pointed him out and they took him off the airplane, had his bags, went through, kept him for several hours. When they found out who he was and why he was carrying it, they didn't arrest him or anything. He told them he needed it for pain control. He's a very famous person, so they knew who he was. But they warned him, next time we're going to have to put you in jail.
Yeah. It's nothing to mess with.
You got to be careful.
I am excited to see, to talk about a potential positive that might come from the descheduling or rescheduling of cannabis. Fingers crossed, if you have, let's say, a prescription for, I don't know, a pharmaceutical, you can take that on a plane, no problem. And if they call it out, you just show the prescription and you're good. And so now what I'm hoping is that because of this rescheduling from Schedule 1, no medicinal value, which was always bullshit, to Schedule 3, which is now more pharmaceutical, which, yes, may have some challenges. I'm okay with admitting that. But maybe one of the best things is that if you're a medical patient, maybe now you'll actually be able to bring stuff on planes because you're essentially bringing your prescription. So fingers crossed, that will be a benefit that happens as a result of this. Because I like looking at the benefits. We can, I mean, I'm not a fan of the federal government overall, so I can fearmonger very easily. But I'm choosing to focus on what positive things can come out of this. And that's definitely one of them that I would like to see.
Yeah, no, just because we're pretty far into the podcast now, the one thing I want to finish the podcast on is the whole issue, because I brought this up with you. Daniel Amen, the famous surgeon that's on television all over, published brain scans showing that cannabis, he says cannabis is damaging your brain. And that to me was irresponsible, unethical, typical wind people up and make money off of bullshit. So before we get into that as our sort of our final run here, just state the offer again and the what they go. So the website is Sacred Smoke Collective. Is it .com?
.com. Yep. .com.
SacredSmokeCollective.com. The code for checkout is Paul Chek.
Yep. No spaces. Yep. Just Paul Chek.
Does it have to be all caps or lowercase, or is there any of that?
I don't think it's case sensitive now.
Okay, so then you're going to get a 10% discount and a mystery gift.
You're going to get a 10% discount, a mystery gift, and you'll have access to the world's best medicine that's available on the legal market, bar none, hands down.
And if there's any reason you don't like it, send it to me and Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. We'll happily dispose of it for you, you know?
Yeah. I'll even pay the shipping costs.
And, you know, I'm glad you brought up Dr. Daniel Amen because, you know, it's not just that he said cannabis was bad for the brain or whatever. He actually came out and said, I mean, he went full silly, to put it in a very nice way. He said that cannabis was a weapon of mass destruction. And my immediate thing is, well, wait a minute. You're a doctor, Dr. Daniel Amen, and I live in Boston, about 20 minutes from something we call methadone mile out here. If you want to see what a weapon of mass destruction looks like, look no further than the opiate industry.
Yeah.
That is the weapon of mass destruction. And the fact that a doctor like him comes out and wants to say anything about cannabis, not that obviously, like, I'm not saying there's not conversations we can have around harm reduction like we've already spoken about, you know, that there's not things we can learn that can help us be more responsible. But has anyone ever died from cannabis? No. Then how is it a weapon of mass destruction? It just doesn't make any sense. How many people die daily from opiates? Daily.
If it's used improperly, it could be a weapon of mass distraction.
Yeah, distraction.
But it won't be coming even close to social media. My God, it wouldn't even touch it.
100%.
You know, we have to be careful with these so-called highly degreed experts, because remember, the Pope told you that God wanted you to get vaccinated, and look how that's worked out. And look how many doctors told you that if you didn't get vaccinated, you were going to die. You know, I've worked with doctors for a very long time, and they're no more reliable than mechanics or hairdressers or plumbers. They can be just as dumb as the next guy, and they can be geniuses too. And they also are not beyond using scare tactics to make a shitload of money off of people. So I brought this up with you specifically because I had people giving me shit on YouTube and other places because I'm pro cannabis from listening to our podcast and seeing video clips and stuff. And I wrote back, I could only handle one, but I wrote a response I hoped everybody read and give about, you know, a whole pile of reasons this could be misinterpreted and you know, look, you know, like I'll give you an example. The number of times I've had patients misdiagnosed by physicians reading MRIs is more than I can count. They get tricked by MRIs all the time. People have unnecessary surgeries because of MRIs, every other damn thing. And I know doctors that are honest with me and they say, you know, it's a lot trickier than just looking at a film that's two-dimensional. So I just felt it was important to address this because I don't like when people are misled like that. If you're going to learn something, you know, like Steiner warned, quarter truths and half truths are far more dangerous than complete falsities because people can recognize a complete falsity. But this is kind of like a quarter truth or an eighth truth or maybe even a 2% truth. You know, it's like, okay, how many people could you show me that actually damage their brain on proper marijuana?
And that's the key, proper, right? Like there was no mention of what quality cannabis/cannabis products he was utilizing. There was also polysubstance abuse. So people that were using other substances like alcohol and other pharmaceuticals were lumped into this study. And then he essentially made the the most beginner mistake ever, which is correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation. And at the end of the day, one of the things that most people don't understand about cannabis is that if you want to receive federal funding to study cannabis in this country, you have to be looking to find a detrimental effect. They will not give you federal funding if you're like, hey, I want to find out how cannabis supports cancer. They'll be like, good luck, you'll have to fund it yourself. And then if you do get the federal funding for it, the only cannabis you can use comes from NIDA, which is the federal program that has grown cannabis at the University of Mississippi since, I believe, the 60s. And by the time researchers get it, it's on average 4 years old. It's been freeze-dried.
Oh, God.
It's full of
Probably
mold.
got fungal infection.
It's full of mold. Like literally, it's
Yeah.
got powdery mildew and botrytis. And that's what they're supposed to use as the example to find what they have to find a detrimental effect for. And we wonder why the research comes out and looks the way it does. At the end of the day, and you'll totally agree with this, results don't lie. Like when you were watching some of these wackos during the pandemic sit up there and eat French fries and tell you, so yummy, why don't you go get your vaccine? You can tell those people did not exemplify what health felt like. They didn't exemplify what love felt like. So again, results don't lie. Words lie, but results do not lie. And so what I put out there, and I imagine you do this too, to Dr. Amin, is like, hey, man, let's do a push-up contest. Let's do any type of physical contest you want. And I guarantee we smash you at every one, which is very interesting if cannabis is hurting our brains and doing these things. It is not. What may be hurting our brains, though, are superwarifins, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, glyphosate, chemical salts. All of these types of things very much may make cannabis seem like it's bad. But it's not cannabis. It's just, once again, humans doing dumb shit with it and then projecting the blame onto the plant because they're not adults and they don't take responsibility and accountability for their own actions in life. And that's the big missing link, that if the world woke up understanding as within, so without tomorrow, the world would be such a better place. But unfortunately, I think we're very far away from that still. But fortunately, what we can do is shed some light on these things and, call Dr. Amin forward, not call him out, but call him forward and be like, hey, man, I think you might have been hoodwinked too. That's the hypothesis I'm going to do, because I can't imagine a world where a doctor is that silly to call cannabis a weapon of mass destruction when we have the opiate epidemic, when we have alcohol doing what it's doing, when we have pesticides and vaccines creating turbo cancers. It's ridiculous to lump cannabis into anything with that.
Well, to even do that, to make a statement like that factually, you would have to have had a control group of people that have never used it. You'd have to have a thorough examination of their brain to see what already exists or doesn't exist in the brain so that you didn't re-diagnose a previous pathology as a marijuana injury. And then you'd have to do a controlled study, and you'd have to do it for a fairly long period of time, because something like cannabis, unless it's just highly toxic, it's not going to change your brain overnight. Mm-hmm. Like cancer, it takes years to get cancer. It doesn't just show up on your doorstep and say, here I am. And I did not see any indication of that. What I saw is him showing patients that he'd worked with that smoked pot. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, okay, you let me know about their trauma history. Let me know about their drug history. Let me know what kind of foods they're eating. Let's do a blood test to see what other chemicals are in their body. So I just felt it was really sleazy.
I mean, there was no baseline scans. There were small and unequal groups. It's just like, at the end of the day, like, listen, I want to learn more about cannabis too. I think that's a beautiful thing. But at the end of the day, like, why should people that have never smoked cannabis be creating studies around cannabis? Like, that just kind of seems a little bit silly to me, because they're going to have no awareness. And we know what happens. Like, think about anyone listening to this show right now that connects with cannabis and has mentioned it to your parents or grandparents or someone that doesn't connect with it. Dr. Daniel Amin is probably, I don't know what age he is, but he's definitely at least 50s, 60s. He grew up in a time where cannabis, the Just Say No campaign, the war on drugs, like that was very prevalent. And so I think it's a little silly to think that his own bias was not interpreted in a study, because when you actually look at it, it's like, it just wasn't a good study. It just wasn't a good study.
Well, I would much rather see him do a correlating study on which commonly used medical drugs damage the brain.
Yeah.
Because there is a huge sample population there.
Yeah. 100%.
And I'm sure if you really put that under the microscope, you'd probably be shit shocked at what you'd find. I mean, the toxicity and the dangerous things that a lot of these drugs do to the body. I mean, I've been studying this stuff for years. In fact, it's so bad. I have been for a very long time, and I teach all Chek professionals to do this, to use the book Drug Facts and Comparisons, because any book on drug side effects that's published by a drug company is never going to tell you the truth.
Exactly.
So probably 25 years ago, a physician friend of mine who's a really sharp guy said, Paul, if you really want to know what the side effects are, you got to buy the book Drug Facts and Comparisons, because they're not funded by a drug company. And when you compare what they show versus what any book by a drug manufacturer shows or software program that you can use, you'll see all the studies that they excluded because they don't want you to know the truth. Mm-hmm. When you start doing what I do and going through all the drugs people are taking that come to me, one of the things that has emerged probably 50 times, if not more, exactly the side effects of the drugs is what they're complaining about, that they think is their problem. And it almost always started shortly after they started taking the drug. Mm-hmm. So it could have been a drug for headache, a drug for inflammation. It could have been a drug for digestive trouble, sexual impotence. I mean, the list is long. But my God, the number of my patients who I track most of their problems right back to the side effects of drugs is shocking. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to start, pointing fingers at a drug, mm-hmm. well, then go to the ones that are used the most mm-hmm. across the world. I mean, look what we've been finding out about, what is it? Not aspirin. What's the other one that they recently?
It might be, was it Advil?
Advil, one of those. Yeah. Turns out to be super fucking bad for people. Tylenol. Yeah. But people have been plowing through that shit by the fucking ton mm-hmm. forever. Mm-hmm. So, if you want to make a statement about something important, go for the biggest threat.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting that I'll throw in here too, and I'll leave the listeners to use their own awareness and curiosity to figure out what this may mean. But what do we understand about the pharmaceutical industry? They're the legal drug cartels in this country, right?
Yeah,
they're the same ones that create the drug, then create the study, then create the agency that controls the standards for it.
Well, they even create fake diseases and diagnoses mm-hmm. to create the illusion. For example, I remember when they came up the what is the book? It's got a code name. It's the Book of Diagnosis, ICD-9 or 5 or whatever.
Oh, the DCM?
The DCM, right? Yeah. I remember when they first created video game addiction and developed drugs for that. They manufactured that title so that they could create symptoms. How do you know if you have video game addiction? You have 2 eyeballs, a mouth, a nose, and you play video games.
Yeah, so you have an Xbox.
They create these fake diagnoses, and then they give you symptoms that are common to almost everybody. And then they sell you all these designer drugs, and parents fall hook, line, and sinker for this shit. And doctors, of course, getting kickbacks for selling this stuff. It's just ridiculous. But anyhow, I think we've made our point on that.
Yeah, and think about this, right? On average, in states that legalize cannabis, opiate use goes down 25%, which think about how much.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and think about how much of an impact that is in the pharmaceutical industry's profits right there. One of the interesting things too is benzodiazepine data shows that benzodiazepine use drops 12 to 15%. So things like Ativan, Zoloft, not maybe Zoloft, Xanax, that's the one. Things like that. They also have a decrease in alcohol. They have a decrease in violence. And again, if you think about, violence, one of the other main systems is think about how many statutory laws there are that are not victim-based crimes. Like, for instance, some people still are not allowed to smoke cannabis themselves. And then they get thrown into jail, which is owned by a private prison, which allows legal slavery. So it's like, again, once you understand why all this works, you can just call it up for what it is. It's a ridiculous entertainment show. People are literally eating donuts and trying to get you to take a vaccine because under health. And then people that have never smoked weed are trying to tell you why cannabis is so bad. If it was so bad, don't you think the Rastas wouldn't exist anymore? Don't you think we wouldn't have ended up here?
The yogis would have died out.
Yeah, like results don't lie. Like cannabis wouldn't have been here and we still wouldn't be here if it was that bad. At the end of the day.
Yeah. It was worth bringing up. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because
it is.
People believe, there's an old joke, you probably know it. What's the difference between God and a doctor?
Yeah. I've never heard. What is it?
God doesn't think he's a doctor.
Yes, dude. Yes. And also
Or she.
yeah. And also like a lot of people, they're in a very upregulated state. So they see a head like that, and they're like, oh my God. And they freak out without being able to breathe and be like, what's the actual quality of this study? Who's the guy that did it? What were the factors? And that's why it does help for people like you and I to break it down and be like, hey guys, still use discernment, still practice harm reduction, still making sure you're getting the right medicine from the right people. Like I said, it's not like smoke all day, there's no side effects. Like, no, like if you use enough of this, you might get very depressed. Like there's things that will happen, but they're a drop in the bucket to anything else that's being not only promoted, but regulated and normalized in our world. Like everyone's on pharmaceuticals, everyone's ingesting pesticides. Like these things have been normalized, and at the end of the day, they're way more detrimental than utilizing a natural plant, even if you utilize that natural plant in not the highest expression type of way.
Yeah, being average today is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, accurate.
Yeah, so, okay, let's repeat that. SacredSmokeCollective.com. On checkout, Paul Chek, Chek.
Yep.
You get a 10% discount and a mystery gift. And get ready for some fucking badass quality, clean, Paul Chek, Ryan Sprague approved. If you're going to do it right stuff.
Life's too short to connect with bad cannabis.
To the Sacred Smoke Collective. It's a real blessing that they're able to do this for all of us. I really am grateful for them. They're beautiful, amazing people. And I can't speak highly enough. I mean, I think it's just a fucking miracle, actually. It's like, that's why I'm doing a whole podcast about it, you know?
Same. That's why I was so excited to tell you about it. And I still remember when you got in the package, I texted you like, yeah, I got it. I'm going to paint on Friday and I'll open it up. And then on Friday, I get the message, wow, with like an entire thing. I'm like, I knew you'd love it.
I'm not an easy guy to impress. I've got high standards and, you've been here, me, I'm a connoisseur of things. Yeah. So most people come to me with what they think is great stuff, and it's usually just cheesy shit. And I'm like, no, here, let me show you the real good stuff. And then they're going, oh my God. But yeah, I'm just grateful to be able to have this conversation. I think everything we talked about today is important.
Yeah.
And I would like to just make another statement. What I teach in Spirit Gym about holistic thinking is at minimum, when it comes to someone like Eamon showing you that your brain's being destroyed by marijuana, we always have to ask who, what, why, where, when, and how. Are vaccinations safe? Who? Who's it for? What? What's it for? Why would you use it? When do you use it? How does it work? And when is it appropriate or inappropriate? If you don't answer those questions, you might end up dead or worse, crippled, or wishing you were dead. So somebody says something like marijuana damages your brain, you better look into the who, what, why, where, when, and how, or you're mentally lazy, and that comes at a cost.
You're a child.
At a big cost.
You're not an adult yet,
Yeah.
And listen, we've all had to grow up at certain times, but at the end of the day, if you really want an empowering life, you have to grow up and clean up and show up, like Carl Jung states, and that's why I'm so grateful to people like you that helped me see that early on in my life, and this is how life is meant to work, I believe. Especially in today's world, life is pretty confusing out there. There's a lot of mass manipulation happening, and let's be real, they're really good at doing what they do. They're really good at mass manipulating a lot of people. And so if we want to be able to, work against that, we have to become very aware. But the good thing is that we all need a Darth Vader to become Luke Skywalker. And so at the end of the day, if you can call them out and be like, okay, that's my Darth Vader. Well, now you have the why to become the Luke Skywalker so that you can help other people as well.
Awesome. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. I sure did. Every time I podcast with Ryan, I enhance my understanding of the cannabinoid system and pick up all sorts of cool tricks and learn about all sorts of stuff that makes it fun and get to go on a nice journey together. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found this educational and inspirational. And I think it's probably pretty clear that we're not a bunch of druggies doing stupid shit. I've accomplished a lot in my life, and so has Ryan. And we know how to use tools to help us be productive and live fully, not get lost and turn into a statistic.
Yes.
So Thank you to my sponsors for your awesome products and for putting money into the hands of organic, biodynamic, and regenerative farmers. Thank you to all of you for anything you buy from the sponsors, because it takes care of the companies that are taking care of us with great products, and it takes care of the farmers and the earth and the soil, and it gives a little bit to the podcast, and it takes care of you. That's a quadruple win. That's super good. Mm-hmm. And thanks again, Ryan. Always great to hang out with you, buddy.
Likewise.
And I'm excited to see what I can share with you next week on Spirit Gym with Paul Chek. Aho, we are safe.
Aho.
We are home. We are whole. It is done. It is done. It is done. Lots of love.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Ryan Sprague. The Sacred Smoke Collective is a private membership association which you can join and be eligible to shop for their organic THCA offerings. Go to sacredsmokecollective.com/ally/Paul Chek for more details and to sign up. That's sacredsmokecollective.com/ALLY/Paul Chek. Use the promo code Paul Chek to get a 10% discount on your purchase. You can also sign up to be an affiliate for Sacred Smoke Collective and share the membership opportunities with your followers and friends. Go to sacredsmokecollective.com/affiliate-registration/ally/Paul Chek. The link for this is also in the show notes. Find Ryan online at highlyoptimized.com and follow him on Instagram at @TheRealRyanSprague and at highly.optimized. You can also watch more from Ryan on YouTube at The Real Ryan Sprague. For more interaction with Paul and to share ideas and ask questions about the topics discussed in this podcast, we invite you to join his Spirit Gym program and community. You can participate in live Q&A sessions with his podcast guests, access the members forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can chat with the other members, attend weekly virtual meetups with Paul, and study his comprehensive Master Key online program. Explore the options and subscribe today by going to myspiritgym.com. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.